You know, when I made Crazy for Kavanaugh, the last thing I expected to see coming out of that was a 3-week-long news cycle and a public opinion show trial with gang rape accusations flying around. So this video will be a bit of a follow-up on that video, since the story changed considerably. But now that it's been a few months since the drama, and we have all the information we need, I want to make sure that no one forgets what happened during these 3 weeks, and how absolutely batshit crazy everyone became, and what the implications of that are for the future of the country, especially with the results of the midterm elections. Now, I had hoped to get this out sooner, and when it was more relevant in the news cycle, but I was a little preoccupied with being a grammar Nazi and getting killed by rabbit ghosts during this time. But we're here now, and that's all that matters. So let's examine what the hell happened here, and how politics and the news media have never sunk any lower than they did during these 3 weeks. So after I uploaded the original video on July 14th, we had about a month and a half of silence on the issue. After the media tried to go after Brett for liking baseball, using credit cards, being named Brett, drinking beer, and supposedly bringing in The Handmaid's Tale, they kind of ran out of fuel for a bit and went back to the usual thing of Trump bashing. Michael Cohen pled guilty to a couple of criminal charges. Paul Manafort was convicted on 8 counts of fraud. I guess we had some more Russia talk. Trump saying stupid things on Twitter. More Stormy Daniels and creepy porn lawyer stuff. Omarosa Manigault was in the news for a little. Remember that? Yeah. And then we finally get to the Senate Judiciary hearings on September 4th. Now, obviously, the Democratic senators had no intention of confirming Kavanaugh from the very day he was nominated. Actually, before anyone was even nominated. So they started to make a charade of the entire hearing, from the very second it began.
I welcome everyone to this confirmation hearing on the nomination of
Mr. Chairman.
Brett Kavanaugh.
Mr. Chairman.
To serve as Associate Justice.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized for a question before we proceed.
Regular order.
Mr. Chairman.
They started screaming at each other.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator,
Mr. Chairman. I've heard calls for regular order.
I'd like to respond to Senator Booker.
Interrupting each other.
And you're rightly proud
Mr. Chairman,
of
if we cannot be recognized, I move to adjourn.
The American people.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Hear directly from Judge Kavanaugh later this afternoon.
Bickering.
So I'd like your clarification. I'd like your response on why you are requesting that in order to submit our questions to
I ask that you stop.
Oh, and there were plenty of interruptions from protesters.
This is a mockery and a travesty of justice. This is a travesty of justice. We will not go back.
Command order. In reality, a president could not expect to receive the full and frank submissions of facts and
above or by the government.
Cory Booker had his famous Spartacus moment, which, as it turns out, not only did the extremely damaging and confidential documents he presented, which were supposed to show how much of an evil racist Kavanaugh is, turn out to not only show that he's the complete opposite of racist, it turns out that the documents themselves weren't even confidential.
I will say that I did willingly violate the chair's rule, and I take full responsibility for violating that, sir. And I violated I violated this rule knowingly, have violated those rules. I knowingly violated the rules that were put forth. I'm going to release the email about racial profiling, and I understand that the penalty comes with potential ousting from the Senate. I openly invite and accept the consequences for what I have done, and I hope that they will bring charges against us. The highest office in the land. This is about the closest I'll probably ever have in my life to an I am Spartacus moment.
Can I ask you how long you're going to say the same thing 3 or 4 times?
No, sir.
How long do you want?
I'm saying I'm knowingly violating the rules.
Okay.
Senator Cornyn called me out for it.
How many times you going to tell us,
sir? I'm saying right now that I'm releasing committee confidential documents.
Mr. Chairman,
As Bill Burke, the man who led the review into the Kavanaugh record, stated, "We cleared the documents last night shortly after Senator Booker's staff asked us to. We were surprised to learn about Senator Booker's histrionics this morning because we had already told him he can use the documents publicly. In fact, we have said yes to every request made by Senate Democrats to make documents public." So he and his staff knew these documents were approved for the public, yet still went along with his pretentious and false bravado to make himself look like the hero.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized, sir?
I hope you don't say the same thing again.
Sir, I will not. And first of all, I will say,
I am so edgy, please love me. Also, I don't understand the plot of Spartacus. Kamala Harris also had her own grandstanding moment by trying to get Kavanaugh to fall into some sort of perjury trap by saying whether or not he knew that he had spoken to a lawyer who worked for the Kasowitz-Benson-Torres law firm, whose founder is representing Trump.
Judge, have you ever discussed special counsel Mueller or his investigation with anyone?
Well, it's in the news every day.
Have you discussed it with anyone?
With other judges, I know.
Have you discussed Mueller or his investigation with anyone at Kasowitz, Benson, and Torres, the law firm founded by Mark Kasowitz, President Trump's personal lawyer?
Be
sure about your answer, sir.
Well, I'm not remembering, but if you have something you want to...
Are you certain you've not had a conversation with anyone at that law firm?
Kasowitz, Benson.
Kasowitz, Benson, and Torres, which is the law firm founded by Mark Kasowitz, who is President Trump's personal lawyer. Have you had any conversation about Robert Mueller or his investigation with anyone at that firm? Yes or no?
Well, is there a person you're talking about?
I'm asking you a very direct question, yes or no?
I need to know I'm not sure I know everyone who works at that law firm.
I don't think you need to. I think you need to know who you talked with. Who'd you talk to?
I don't think I'm not remembering, but I'm happy to be refreshed, or if you want to tell me who you're thinking of who works.
Now, I don't know about you, but from what I've heard, lawyers generally don't tend to go around asking other lawyers about what law firm they work for when they meet them. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't remember that information, especially if they're surrounded by hundreds of lawyers every single day.
Pause the clock. Let me raise my objection.
Recognized.
This town is full of law firms. Law firms are full of people. Law firms have a lot of names. There are a lot of people who work at a lot of law firms.
Moreover, this Kasowitz-Benson-Torres law firm has nearly 300 attorneys. Is Kavanaugh expected to know all of these people?
The fact that it's ongoing, it's a topic in the news every day. I talked to fellow judges about it. It's in our, it's in the courthouse in the District of Columbia. So I guess the answer to that is yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
But what this really was just a moment for Kamala Harris to do stuff like this.
I want to understand your response to my question, because it's a very direct one. I'm asking you a very direct question, yes or no. Are you saying that with all that you remember, you have an impeccable memory, how can you not remember whether or not you had a conversation? It's a very direct question.
Right.
I'll ask again.
But
I asked the question just a minute ago. I'm surprised you forgot. It's a really specific question. I think you're thinking of someone and you don't want to tell us. I'll move on. Okay. Clearly, you're not going to answer the question.
You know what the goal of this kind of talk is? You know what all this turns into in the media? It turns into, oh my god, why didn't he answer the question? Is he hiding something? What does he know? Oh my god, is he lying? Ah! Because the suggestion here is that Kavanaugh is stonewalling. The implication of that being that Kamala has some kind of information on her hands which suggests that Brett Kavanaugh may have had a conversation with someone from that law firm about the Russia investigation or Bob Mueller. Not only was Kamala suggesting this, but her own staff members told CNBC that they had reason to believe that a conversation happened and are continuing to pursue it. Well, guess what? She had literally no evidence of any conversation taking place, and was just leveling accusations at Kavanaugh so the media can have an orgy of speculation. We also know that no such conversation took place because the Kasowitz law firm came out with a statement saying there have been no discussions regarding Robert Mueller's investigation between Judge Kavanaugh and anyone at our firm. What was Kamala's response to this? Just asked Kamala Harris about Kasowitz's denial that no one at the firm talked to Kavanaugh about Mueller probe. They're not under oath, she told me. So she doesn't believe them? The question was asked under oath, and she didn't answer. You know what happened next? Nothing. It was done with. This was never pursued again. These kinds of questions are designed for grandstanding and media orgies, and Kamala Harris is a very talented politician who knows her craft for manipulating the media. And again, this man has been in the field of law for decades now. I'm not sure that his conversation starters are, "Hey, I'm Brett, what law firm do you work for?" "Oh, I work for David & Schiller." "Oh, cool, let's talk about Bob Mueller and the Russia investigation." In fact, of all people, Michael Avenatti made the case better than these two clowns when he said in response to all this, "When I first started trying cases, my mentor taught me two basic things. 1. Never overpromise and suggest to the jury that you have evidence when you don't, i.e. get over the tips of your skis. And 2. Never get caught trying to deceive the jury. Words to live by in life as well."
Okay, and did you talk with anyone at Kasowitz, Benson, and Torres?
You asked me that. I need to know who works there.
I think you can answer the question without me giving you a list of all employees of that law firm.
Well, actually, I can't.
Why not?
Because I don't know who works there.
It's just a big waste of time. Yes, that's exactly what I said. That's exactly what I said. I said it's a waste of time. I don't think there's really...
Big waste of time, that's all it is.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
That's exactly what I said.
That's the problem with it.
But that was just a taste of the initial bit of crazy. Between the start of the nomination hearings all the way to the end, we had about 227 arrests of protesters. And we're just getting started. But by this point, the focus of the media shifted back over to Kavanaugh, so it was ready for some more drama. And then, on September 12th, we get the first rumors of an anonymous letter floating around Congress. The Intercept reported at the time that Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee have privately requested to view a Brett Kavanaugh-related document in possession of the panel's top Democrat, Dianne Feinstein. And on the next day, on the eve of Kavanaugh's confirmation vote, Senator Feinstein came out and stated, "I have received information from an individual concerning the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. That individual strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward or press the matter further, and I have honored that decision. I have, however, referred the matter to the federal investigative authorities." And according to The New Yorker, the allegation dates back to the early 1980s, when Kavanaugh was a high school student at Georgetown Preparatory School in Bethesda, Maryland, and the woman attended a nearby high school. In the letter, the woman alleged that during an encounter at a party, Kavanaugh held her down and he attempted to force himself on her. She claimed in the letter that Kavanaugh and a classmate of his, both of whom had been drinking, turned up music that was playing in the room to conceal the sound of her protests, and that Kavanaugh covered her mouth with his hand. But she was able to free herself. Although the alleged incident took place decades ago, and the three individuals involved were minors, the woman said that the memory had been a source of ongoing distress for her, and that she had sought psychological treatment as a result. So now at the time, this was a pretty gross accusation for Dianne to be bringing forward. You know why? Because Dianne Feinstein was literally sitting on this document for 6 weeks before she decided to come out and announce it to the world. You know why people think politics is a disgusting business? This is why. Here we have Dianne Feinstein dredging up 35-year-old accusations of sexual misconduct, occurring when the supposed parties involved were minors on the eve of a confirmation vote. If Dianne Feinstein had known of these allegations 6 weeks before, why is she waiting until the last second to bring this up? If you have known about an attempted rape allegation from 6 weeks ago, aren't you obliged to report something like that? I don't know, as soon as you get the information? Or hey, you all just spent 3 days running a confirmation hearing. Why not mention it to Kavanaugh then, Dianne? Dianne?
From the outset, I have believed these allegations were extremely serious and bear heavily on Judge Kavanaugh.
Then why didn't you ask him about this? You had 3 days to ask him about this.
These documents in my hands are so serious that I'm going to hide them from all of you. I'm not going to report it to the FBI or law enforcement, and I'm not going to release them for 6 weeks. Also, where am I?
And for many Democrats, none of this seemed to matter. Who cares about the timing of the allegations? If it can get them out, then so be it. I think one of the most honest mainstream liberals I can find out there is Bill Maher, when even he had to acknowledge that the last-minute timing to smear Kavanaugh's character made liberals look bad.
What do you think about this Brett Kavanaugh thing, where suddenly, right before he's going to get the vote, and he's an ultimate suck-up and dick, Brett Kavanaugh, but now they're coming at him with this accusation from someone anonymous that he was at a party, a sexual assault in a high school from an anonymous source. I think it makes us look bad.
It's not going to stop him. He'll get in. It's sad, but he will get in.
Yes, he will get in. But I mean, is this something that...
We need all to pray for Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, okay.
Now, when I say liberal, I'm not talking about leftists. There's an important distinction there that I think Dennis Prager does a good job at explaining in his video Left or Liberal. Because I know there are some people on the left that watch these videos who keep thinking that I'm talking about them when I say the left or leftist. But anyways, for others, outside of Bill Maher and people close enough to his brand of liberalism, this doesn't matter. The timing of it all? Nah, forget about it. Let's go after Brett.
Somebody leaked this to The Intercept and then to other people in the media. And let's be honest, the motive was probably to stop Kavanaugh, not to have justice prevail.
Probably true. So what?
This is how you waste time and play the dirtiest game of politics. Oh, and the best part is that Diane herself even stated that she can't say that everything is truthful. I don't know. Nice, dude. And what does the media do with all this? Oh, well, they start smearing Brett Kavanaugh, of course. Hashtag me too, am I right? And then on September 16th, we find out that the person behind the allegation is a professor of psychology from Palo Alto University, Christine Blasey Ford. Speaking in the Washington Post, she said that one summer in the early 1980s, Kavanaugh and a friend, both stumbling drunk, corralled her into a bedroom during a gathering of teenagers at a house in Montgomery County. While his friend watched, she said, Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed on her back and groped her over her clothes, grinding his body over hers and clumsily attempting to pull off her one-piece bathing suit and the clothing she wore over it. When she tried to scream, she said, he put his hand over her mouth. I thought he might inadvertently kill me, she said. Now after this story broke out, Brett Kavanaugh immediately came out and completely denied the allegations. I categorically and unequivocally deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time. He was also willing to immediately testify to the Senate Judiciary Committee in any way the committee deems appropriate to refute this false allegation from 36 years ago and defend my integrity. The second witness named by Ford, Mark Judge, who was supposedly in the room with her and Kavanaugh, also came out and denied the allegations. I have no memory of this alleged incident. Another witness she named, Patrick Smith, also denied the allegations, and said that I have no knowledge of this party in question, nor do I have any knowledge of the allegations of improper conduct she has leveled against Brett Kavanaugh. The fourth witness named, Leland Kaiser, Ford's lifelong friend, said in a statement released by her attorney that Miss Kaiser does not know Mr. Kavanaugh and she has no recollection of ever being at a party or gathering where he was present, with or without Dr. Ford. She did state, however, that despite not knowing Kavanaugh or ever being at a party with him, that she still believed Ford's allegations. Now before we go any further here, we have to look at the allegations and determine the credibility of them, because we can't just start making allegations about people from 30 years ago and expect them to be taken seriously without any form of corroborating evidence. So first, we have no idea where this incident took place. We have no location, we have no date, we have no time, and we have no idea who anyone else at this party even was. And already, we have Kavanaugh, Judge, Smith, and Kaiser all denying being witnesses to such a party or even knowing who Kavanaugh is after being named by Ford. Also, the only time these allegations were ever mentioned in the last 35 years was supposedly at a couples therapy session with Ford and her husband in 2012, where Ford mentioned the details to her therapist. But even then, the therapy notes don't actually say Kavanaugh's name, and the only person who says Kavanaugh's name was mentioned at the therapy session is her husband. But even here, we already have a discrepancy in the therapist notes because the notes say that 4 boys were involved in the rape attempt, when Ford has been saying that only 2 were involved. Now Ford says that the therapist got it wrong, and that there were only 4 boys at the party and 2 involved in the incident. Who are we supposed to believe here? Her or the therapist who's actually written down the notes? Are we just supposed to completely disregard the therapist because Ford says so? And in the following year, in 2013, Ford described in another therapy session that a rape attempt occurred in her late teens. Which again is another discrepancy because if this incident supposedly took place when she was 15, 15 is not late teens. 15 is early to mid-teens. Also, along with Ford's Washington Post interview, she supplied her polygraph test results, which showed that she was not lying when asked about her allegations. And here's the thing about polygraphs. Polygraphs are inadmissible in court because polygraphs are extremely unreliable. For those of you who are unaware of how polygraphs work, polygraphs don't actually measure if you're telling the truth or not. All they do is measure stress levels that arise from an interrogation. These things do not measure truth or falsity, only stress. And there are countless YouTube videos and articles out there showing you how you can beat one. There is a reason why they're useless in courts of law. So are these allegations credible? Well, we've got some issues here, and without any actual evidence of this party even occurring, and without any way in which we can track down any details of this even occurring, and with the discrepancies in these therapist notes in her story, this is literally just a he said, she said situation. I mean, we legitimately have zero substantiating evidence for any of this. But none of this mattered to the Senate Democrats. These allegations were enough for them to call for Kavanaugh's nomination to be pulled and to end the entire hearing process. Now here's what should have immediately happened after this news came out. Immediately, the Senate should have called forth Christine Blasey Ford to testify, and then have had Brett Kavanaugh respond to her testimony. I'm even of the opinion that Mark Judge should have been subpoenaed to testify to the committee, but at the very least, get these two people in the building to testify. Instead, here's what happened. We spent 10 days going back and forth between Christine Blasey Ford, her lawyers, and the Senate Judiciary Committee on deciding on a date for her to publicly come forth and testify under oath. First, the date was set for September 21st, but then her attorney said that Ford wouldn't be ready to testify on that date and asked for further negotiations. In total, they spent about 5 days going back and forth on making a decision for an appearance date, with numerous extensions being given. As Senator Chuck Grassley stated in his mess of a tweet, 5 times now we have granted extension for Dr. Ford to decide if she wants to proceed with her desire stated 1 week ago that she wants to tell the Senate her story. Dr. Ford, if you change your mind, say so we can move on. I want to hear your testimony. Come to us or we to you. And then later, a September 24th date was also rejected. Meanwhile, we have Ford's attorneys blasting Republicans in the deadline dates as bullying Dr. Ford and depriving her of the ability to make a considered decision that has life-altering implications for her and her family. Hey, you know who's also facing life-altering implications? The guy being accused of attempted rape. She has already been forced out of her home and continues to be subjected to harassment, hate mail, and death threats. Our modest request is that she be given an additional day to make her decision. I do find it interesting how nowhere is it mentioned here that she wouldn't have been forced out of her home if it wasn't for Dianne Feinstein and her staff leaking the letter. Again, somehow everyone in the media knew that Dianne Feinstein had knowledge of this letter, and someone high up enough on Capitol Hill had enough knowledge to know Ford's name and allow the contents of her letter to be leaked. Yet Feinstein still had the gall to say that Dr. Blasey Ford did not want her story of sexual assault to be public. She requested confidentiality, and I honored that. It wasn't until the media outed her that she decided to come forward. No, someone in your staff was leaking this information to the media. In fact, at this point, it's looking like it may have been Dianne Feinstein's staffer Heather Sawyer, as reported by One America News Network.
Can you tell us that your staff did not leak it?
Oh, I don't believe my staff would leak it. I have not asked that question directly, but I do not believe
you know
they
that?
would.
I mean, how in the world could that get in the hands of the press?
The answer is no. The staff
have you
asked
they did not. Have you asked your staff or other staff members of the Judiciary Committee?
Pardon me? Well, Jennifer reminds me I've asked her before about it, and that's true.
Well, somebody leaked it if it wasn't you.
Well, it was, I'm telling you, it was not, I did not. I mean, I was asked to keep it confidential.
Senator Tom Cotton also noted that only Democrats and their aides had access to the letter. So what she really means is Democrats leaked the letter. Either Feinstein approved the leak or she can't control her own committee. Neither good. Incredibly, Dianne Feinstein later tries to blame Christine Blasey Ford herself for leaking the letter by talking about it to her friends. And then she says that the letter was actually never leaked at all.
Senator, I don't think the letter was ever leaked.
Well, how did the press know to contact her about her complaint?
She testified here this morning that she had talked to friends about it, and that press had talked to her.
Senator,
but that can't be true either, because Christine Blasey Ford testified under oath that she did not send the letter to anyone other than her attorneys, her congresswoman, and Feinstein's office.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm a little confused. I thought only the member of the House and Senator Feinstein and her lawyers had the letter, so her friends she might have talked to about it couldn't leak the letter if they just had a verbal conversation unless she gave them a copy of the letter.
Moreover, no one actually forced Ford to come out and name herself, because as far as we're aware, it wasn't until she herself came forward with her interview in the Washington Post that we even knew about her name. She was just worried that her name might preemptively come out if someone in the media accidentally released it. But again, no one in the media would even have knowledge of this letter or her name if someone didn't leak it to them. That's the whole problem here. Also, Ford doesn't even have to publicly testify before the committee. It can be conducted in private. As Senator Grassley said in a statement to Ford's attorneys, I have invited Dr. Ford to testify regarding her allegations against Judge Kavanaugh, and in recognition of how difficult it can be to discuss allegations of this kind in public, I have also offered her the choice of testifying in either a public or closed session of the hearing. so she doesn't even have to do this publicly, which makes this statement by Ford's attorneys even more suspect because it gives the impression that Ford's lawyers are playing more of a partisan political game against Republicans more so than Ford is. Because my contention was that Christine Blasey Ford is being honest in her assertions that something happened to her, and that if anything suspicious is going on here, that it has more to do with her lawyers than it does with Ford herself. We'll get more into the situation with her lawyers later, but first we need to get back to some of the arguments flying around during the time of negotiating a hearing date, which just keeps going on and on. So first, her lawyers expressly said that Ford will talk with the committee, and the Republicans said, sure, let's talk. But then Ford's lawyers said, she's not prepared to talk with them at a hearing on Monday. Oh, and we also want an FBI investigation. Okay, so now we need to get to this thing with the FBI investigation. The FBI does not investigate state crimes from 36 years ago. When the FBI did an investigation of the sexual harassment allegations against Clarence Thomas during his nomination process, they did that because Clarence Thomas was a federal employee on federal property and under federal jurisdiction at the time of the allegations. The same is not true of someone's house that we don't even know the location of in the middle of Maryland, where we don't even know the time or place of the incident. There is no grounds for a federal investigation here. No federal crime has taken place, which is why the Senate Republicans just wanted her to come and talk about her allegations and testify. Dr. Ford's testimony would reflect her personal knowledge and memory of events. Nothing the FBI or any other investigator does would have any bearing on what Dr. Ford tells the committee, so there is no reason for further delay. In fact, the most the FBI can actually do here is include the allegation information from Christine Blasey Ford into Kavanaugh's background file and send it off to the White House, which is what they already did. Upon receipt of the information on the night of September 12th, we included it as part of Judge Kavanaugh's background file as per the standard process. The same FBI spokesperson also noted that the allegation does not involve any potential federal crime. And as Matt Zapotosky over at the Washington Post said, the FBI isn't doing a criminal investigation based on what Feinstein told them. The broad outline of the allegation, as I understand it, seems like it'd be in state/local authorities' wheelhouse, if there even is a crime and if the statute of limitations hasn't run. And as Jonah Goldberg over at National Review noted, there's no crime scene to investigate, no hair follicles to send to Quantico. At this point, the FBI can only do another background check on Kavanaugh, which you might be curious to know, they've already done 6 background checks on the guy, none of which turned up any evidence of misconduct. In fact, in a situation like this, the Senate Judiciary Committee actually has more power than the FBI, because the committee can actually subpoena witnesses, documents, and other materials. And whether testifying to the FBI or the Judiciary Committee, you're still under the penalty of law if you lie. So, again, just come and testify. Otherwise, this just looks like stalling tactics by Ford's lawyers. As Senator Grassley said in a previous statement to Ford's lawyers, I certainly understand and respect Dr. Ford's desire for an investigation of her allegations. That is precisely what the Senate is doing. That is why our investigators have asked to speak with your client. That is why I have invited Dr. Ford to tell her story to the Senate and, if she chooses so, to the American people. It is not the FBI's role to investigate a matter such as this. He also states that the committee's standard procedure for supplemented background investigations is to conduct phone or in-person interviews with the relevant parties to discuss the underlying issues. To that end, committee staff has attempted to contact you directly by phone and email several times to schedule a call at a time convenient for you and your client. We thus far have not heard back from you with regard to that request. Now, there was some on the right who thought that the Senate committee should have requested an FBI investigation from the White House, mainly because the Democrats have created an almost unwinnable situation for Kavanaugh to clear his own name, and because at the time, it wasn't necessarily clear that he had all the votes to win the nomination. All a pundit over at Hot Air made a good point that if Kavanaugh is confirmed without the opportunity for vindication by Democrats' own preferred law enforcement authority, the left will hang an asterisk on every opinion he writes for the next 30 years. If you call their bluff and the FBI finds nothing though, the Dems look like smear merchants. It's very unlikely that Kavanaugh can dig his way out of the suspicion that's been piled on him through his own efforts. Ford's allegations are so thin on specifics that there's next to nothing by way of hard evidence he can provide to clear himself. He'll spend hours being grilled about teenage partying, and Ford will be questioned very respectfully about her story. All she has to do is prove that she believes that it happened, not that it actually happened, and he'll end up damaged. It may be that an FBI investigation, as silly as it seems under the circumstances, is the one thing that can lend some independent, nonpartisan authority to his claims of innocence. Jonah Goldberg also wrote at the time that opponents of having the FBI investigate have often said, rightly, that all the FBI can do is what the Senate is going to do. Ask the relevant parties what happened. That's right, so have the FBI ask away. Quickly. Lying to the Senate is a crime just like lying to the FBI. But culturally and politically, people do think that the FBI actually is the super serious police. And since doing background checks is part of its portfolio, having the FBI do a 7th or add an addendum to the 6th background check of Brett Kavanaugh doesn't seem crazy to me. So while an FBI investigation would be seen as an obvious delay strategy by Democrats, it was also, at the time, the last best chance at clearing Kavanaugh's name and character, even though the FBI has less power than the Senate Judiciary on the issue. Now we'll get back to the FBI investigation later, but going back to the back and forth between Ford's lawyers and the Senate Judiciary Committee, her lawyer started saying that she won't show up at the hearing unless it's on fair and secure terms. Who in the world would be in favor of unsecure and unfair terms? I want this to be the most dangerous and violent hearing you have ever seen in your life. If you mean get rid of the protesters in the back, then sure, let's get them out and let's hold this damn hearing already. This was really starting to look more like political theater from her lawyers to keep pushing back the Kavanaugh vote more than anything. And what do you think was happening in the media during these 10 days of negotiations? Well, here's a wise comment from Think Progress, which was tweeted out by Planned Parenthood. Losing the opportunity to become a Supreme Court justice for life appears to be an outrage only to those who feel a man of Kavanaugh's background is entitled to that position. This from an article titled, Brett Kavanaugh and the Breathless Effort to Protect a Rich White Man from Repercussions. Look at this privileged whitey!
Kill Whitey!
Yeah, forget the fact that we have no evidence for anything, no one has even testified about anything yet. These allegations are enough. Get him out. Also, he's white. Did you know that? Alex Griswold said it right about garbage statements like this when he stated that if Kavanaugh is denied the seat, rightly or wrongly, he will be publicly declared a rapist. His wife will be the wife of a rapist. His daughters will have friends telling them he is a rapist. History will remember him as a rapist. This is not how you want political discourse to run in this country. Literally, if this is the only standard we are going to have in this country now, any man can be accused of anything at any time and have their life ruined from baseless and unsubstantiated allegations. If this is the new standard, don't be surprised to see this pit get deeper and political discourse get even worse. Now, as much as I've been talking about the smear campaign against Kavanaugh, there's been just as much vitriol thrown against Ford herself for coming out with these allegations. It is not a fun situation to be in when you are receiving death threats against you or your family, which has been happening to Christine Blasey Ford ever since her name came out. In fact, after she publicly came out with the allegations, there was a period of time where she wasn't even able to go home because of the security risk. Now, she did start a GoFundMe campaign, which has raised over $840,000, which, after the Democratic staffers leaked out her situation all across the media, pressuring her to come out and subsequently receive death threats, harassment, and not even be able to return home, I couldn't care less about the money she's raised. She's deserved every penny after that. But now, as terrible as all the attacks have been, it does not mean that you get to hide behind these concerns for safety and your own personal emotional pain after you've publicly accused someone else of attempted rape, and are now a factor holding up the nomination process for the highest court in the country. But, finally, Ford's lawyers come out and give a list of conditions for her appearance. These are some of the conditions laid out by Ford's lawyers according to a CBS source. Ford will not appear any sooner than next Thursday, no questions to be asked at hearing by any outside counsel, only by senators, Mark Judge must be subpoenaed, Kavanaugh would testify first, then Ford would testify, and Kavanaugh would have no opportunity to respond or rebut, the Friday deadline for her to provide written statement before the hearing would be waived, provide adequate security, only one pool camera in the hearing room, and Ford and Kavanaugh must be allotted the same amount of time to talk. Okay, so some of this is really stupid. So first, no outside counsel can question her, which means Kavanaugh's lawyers can't question her, just senators, which is exactly what Ford's lawyers want. They want the Democratic senators to defend her and grandstand for the entire time and rail on evil old white Republican men. It'll look exactly like the previous hearings, with Spartacus proclaiming how great he is and how wonderful Christine Blasey Ford is and how much courage and bravery she has and how wonderful it is for a woman to fight back against the man. And look at these evil white men over here who want to put you in a Handmaid's Tale costume. Oh, the horror! Oh!
All right, everybody, you know the drill. We all know how we're voting, but let's get those sound bites for our donor emails.
That's what it's going to look like if it's only the senators questioning her. The politicians in the room who want to use this situation to push their political agenda and fuel their base will be able to do exactly that. And the media will eat it up. The next one is absolutely ridiculous. Kavanaugh has to testify first and he will have no opportunity to respond or rebut.
There is no proceeding in American life where the defense to a charge testifies first. For good reason. You don't know what you're being charged with. If I were to go into court and the police said, you know what, we've got a charge against you. The charge is manslaughter. I was like, well, I need to hear the details of that so I can, defend myself, maybe give you an alibi, tell you where I was at the time. And I say, you know what? No, we're not going to give you any of that stuff. You need to present your defense first. You would rightly say, what are you talking about?
Ben Shapiro wrecks liberal lunatic. Ben Shapiro destroys every college snowflake. Ben Shapiro destroys Don Lemon. Ben Shapiro destroys pro-abortion arguments. Ben Shapiro destroys everybody Ben Shapiro destroys my pussy with facts.
Moreover, this demand is blatantly unconstitutional. You have a right to confront your accuser in the Constitution. We have a confrontation clause. This standard goes all the way back to ancient Rome. And at this point, the entire Kavanaugh hearing has turned into a criminal prosecution of the guy.
And let's be real about this. This has become a criminal trial of Brett Kavanaugh. This is a criminal trial. Brett Kavanaugh's career either will end with him on the Supreme Court or it will end with him bankrupt, right? It will end with him maybe, really, losing his job on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, being destroyed as a human being. Right? That's where this goes if people feel that Blasey Ford is telling the truth.
Ben Shapiro destroys my pussy with...
Even if you don't like Kavanaugh, which as I said in the first Kavanaugh video, I didn't really care for him too much, but even if you don't like the guy, I can't see how you can be giving any credence to Ford, the media outrage, and especially her lawyers after this. If you know anything about the Constitution, or law, or the media, and the savagery of public opinion, you can just see that there is something really nasty going on here. This is not being treated seriously. We are not getting a serious proceeding here. We are getting political theater. On one side, we have a guy who wants to testify immediately and confront the accusations being made against him. On the other side, we have someone who wants to testify, but not today, and not the next day either, and not next week, and okay, here's all my demands, and also you're bullying me by trying to get me to testify faster. What is this? And the Republican senators on the committee rightly disregarded most of these requests, though not all of them. So they rejected the request to limit questions to senators only, they rejected the request to make Kavanaugh testify first, and they rejected the subpoena of Mark Judge. They did, however, allow for Kavanaugh to not be in the same room as her, they allowed for extra security, and for giving her breaks during her testimony. Okay, fine, fantastic. At least we have a hearing date now. So Ford and her lawyers finally agreed to testify on Thursday, September 27th. And it took just enough time to get this all settled out that Kavanaugh's name will have been completely tarnished. Remember guys, this was 10 days of rank media speculation and wild journalist fantasies about Kavanaugh's rapey escapades. Here are some examples of the media orgy, like in this article here that appeared in Real Clear Politics, titled, "Men Are More Afraid Than Ever." Good. Now the article attacks the line of argument from some Kavanaugh defenders who say, so what if he attempted to rape someone? He was 17 and it was over 35 years ago. Whatever. Which isn't a good argument at all, because attempted rape is not really something to be saying, heh, whatever dude over. But here's the best part of this piece. Many of us, I include myself, are almost persuaded. Many of us have been trained from birth to believe that men, unlike women, are long-suffering and stoic. That means that their pain, when they do express it, strikes us as almost holy. It took me decades to realize that something like the opposite is true. It's not that men's pain isn't real, it's that our culture vastly overestimates it. A certain kind of man not getting exactly what he wants, precisely when he wants it, will truly believe he's suffering more than a woman in pain who has never been told that what she wants might matter. While this doesn't make him a liar, it does limit him and blind him to those limits. Okay, so it doesn't matter that there's been no evidence at all which even remotely makes Kavanaugh out to be an attempted rapist. The mere belief that there's a patriarchal asymmetry in society makes his denial of the accusations against him meaningless, because he's a man. Great work there, Lily. Really smart commentary. Truth, innocence, or evidence doesn't really matter here. Just the societal imbalances between the sexes. Or here's another piece from Yahoo by Matt Bai. What Kavanaugh deserves and what we deserve from him. Where he says that instead of denying the accusations, Kavanaugh should have just said, judge me for my lifetime of service, not whatever may have happened at 17 that I was too stupid and drunk to remember. But that's not what Kavanaugh's saying. He dismisses not only the allegation, but the context around it. He says he wasn't that kind of kid. He says he wasn't there in the house Ford can describe in detail. No, she doesn't really remember the details all that well, especially the ones that could help lead to any hard evidence, but okay. He makes a victim of her all over again by essentially calling her delusional. He makes no allowance for the possibility that his own memory is blurred by inebriated youth. My fear is that his experiences as a partying teenager didn't actually teach him a hell of a lot about fallibility or shame. He seems not to have emerged with much appreciation for the gray areas in which most larger truths reside. Okay, so according to this guy, Kavanaugh shouldn't even be able to just flat out deny the allegations. He should be able to entertain the possibility that he attempted to rape someone. And the fact that he doesn't do this, or bash his younger self some more, and the fact that he denies the allegations at all, might just be a hint of him being guilty of something? That's what this guy's trying to say here, that Kavanaugh's denial is some sort of evidence of his guilt, or unfitness to be on the Supreme Court, because he doesn't appreciate the gray areas in which most larger truths reside. Yeah, great take there, Matt. Or here's a good article by Chauncey DeVega in Salon magazine titled, Brett Kavanaugh is a blend of toxic male privilege and affluenza. Kavanaugh already represented white male privilege on steroids. Assault allegations are just icing on the cake. Yes, Chauncey, yes. When Kavanaugh's defenders make excuses for his alleged sexual assault and attempted rape of Christine Blasey Ford, they are endorsing and channeling white male privilege and toxic white masculinity. In America, these unearned advantages are the almost exclusive province of those who are white and male. This type of white male entitlement is also amplified and exaggerated for rich, white, conservative, heterosexual men. Elite white men like Brett Kavanaugh, and of course Donald Trump, represent white male privilege and male entitlement on steroids. If confirmed to the Supreme Court, Kavanaugh will be the white male privilege affluenza justice. See, this is what the white men are evil and privileged crowd has to resort to. Talking about the toxicity of men, how rich they are, how conservative they may be, and their supposed feelings of entitlement to positions of power. Because if they didn't talk about any of this, you know what they'd have to talk about? The fact that there is no corroborative evidence of any attempted rape taking place. Or here's another article from the Huffington Post by Emily Peck. Brett Kavanaugh liked female clerks who looked a certain way, Yale student was told. A few years ago, as she was prepping to interview for a judicial clerkship, a student at Yale Law School received a troubling combination of warning and advice from her professors about one federal judge in particular. Brett Kavanaugh, she was told, liked his female clerks to have a certain look. The professors proffering the advice are themselves well known. Both Jed Rubenfeld and his wife, Amy Chua, told this woman about Kavanaugh's preferences. Though neither said the judge did anything untoward regarding the woman he worked with, the student found their counsel off-putting. Okay, what is this? So in other words, we have third parties who told a Yale student who has never even met Kavanaugh before that he apparently likes female clerks to have a certain look. But there's also no evidence that Kavanaugh has done anything wrong to these women. And this means what? The article doesn't even say what this certain look is supposed to mean. What does it mean, don't come to work dressed like a homeless person? Does it mean don't look like a blue-haired hipster? Does it mean don't have your face covered in piercings? Does it mean don't get ankle tattoos with Chinese characters that you don't even know the meaning of? What is this? Well, aside from just providing speculation, one of the professors who gave the student the supposed warning, Amy Chua, also advised the student in the article to dress outgoing and to even send her pictures of what she planned on wearing so she could evaluate it. Because later in the article, she also says that for the more than 10 years that I've known him, Judge Kavanaugh's first and only litmus test in hiring has been excellence. So this sounds a lot more like dressing for excellence. This same woman also wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal titled, Kavanaugh is a Mentor to Women, where she boasts of placing 10 clerks with Kavanaugh, 8 of them women, and even her own daughter just accepted a clerkship with Kavanaugh. Are we supposed to believe that this woman is sending her own daughter to what? Be sexually harassed? But according to the article, he likes his law clerks to look a certain way. So that obviously means he tried to rape Christine Blasey Ford when he was 17, right? How is this article not just a smear piece? There is no evidence of any wrongdoing here. This article is trash. The trash! And here's another article by Molly Ball in Time magazine. Since the day of his nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court, Kavanaugh has portrayed himself as a champion of women. He emphasized the woman he cherished, saying his mother, a judge, was his ultimate role model, and talking about his daughters and the majority of female law clerks he hired. Members of the girls' basketball teams he's coached sat in the front rows behind him at his Senate confirmation hearing. Earlier, he had recited the names of his daughter's teammates, and he said, I love helping girls grow into confident players. But one after another, woman interrupted. Protesters popped up in the back of the room, yelling and waving signs before being hustled out by police. But the women weren't done disrupting him. Just when the end seemed in sight, his confirmation vote less than a week away, Christine Blasey Ford decided to put her name to a devastating accusation. It was a hazy accusation, hesitantly lodged, short on detail, and curiously timed. But Ford's charge shattered Kavanaugh's carefully crafted tableau, calling into doubt the image he projected. The row of young girls, legs bare in their private school skirts, looked different now. What is that supposed to mean? What are you implying, Molly? That he assaulted them too? Oh, you don't have any evidence for that? Oh, okay, so you're just gonna throw this out there to further smear Kavanaugh's character. Thanks, Molly. All women are victims, even if there's no evidence for it. That's her pitch here. And there are so many more articles along these lines, filled with some of the worst smears and character attacks I have ever seen. But the media aside, there was plenty more stupid coming from politicians, and in particular Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Who is not asking the FBI to investigate these claims? The White House. Judge Kavanaugh has not asked to have the FBI review these claims. Is that the reaction of an innocent person? It is not.
Hey, Senator Gillibrand, you know what? I think you literally raped my butthole 3 years ago in Washington, D.C. In fact, I know you did it. You raped my butthole, Senator. I mean, I don't have evidence, but you don't have the right to ask me for evidence, bitch! You better call an investigation on yourself right now or you're guilty. And you like raping juice boys. Yeah, if you think you're innocent, you don't call for FBI investigations on yourself. This is not guilty until proven innocent. This is innocent until proven guilty. How inept can you be on the fundamentals of American society? We get the same thing too from Hawaiian Senator Mazie Hirono.
And why isn't Judge Kavanaugh asking for an FBI investigation if he has nothing to hide? We need to have him go before the FBI. If he's not afraid of the truth, why is he not himself, as Dr. Ford has done, called for an FBI investigation?
And we also get some more stupid from Senator Gillibrand, where she says that Ford shouldn't even testify.
I believe her. I stand with her. And
do you hope she shows up on Monday? Do you hope that she testifies?
I don't think she should be bullied into this scenario where it's a he said, she said, where many members of the committee have already made up their mind. Without the benefit of an FBI investigation where it's nonpartisan and objective, and without the benefit of corroborating witnesses being able to testify, it's a sham hearing. And I don't think she should participate in it.
Denying Dr. Ford an FBI investigation is silencing her. Forcing her into a sham hearing is silencing her, and pushing through Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation is silencing her. Okay, so if she testifies, it's a sham hearing. If she doesn't testify, it's silencing her. And if they make her come and testify immediately, it's bullying her and turns the entire process into a sham and also silences her. Lady, it's called a hearing, not a silencing. You have to be a politician to be throwing around rhetoric this stupid.
Well, we just think we just think it's a big waste of time. That's all it is. But yeah, you are right. You are right. You can't argue. You can't argue with this guy. I am so glad you're here right now.
This isn't about truth or innocence. This isn't about considering the seriousness of the allegations. This is all about demagoguery. Because once again, we have no idea where this incident took place, we have no location, we have no date, we have no time, everyone who was named denies being there or having knowledge of any such party, Ford doesn't even know who invited her to the party, who owned the house this supposedly took place at, how she even got there, or how she even got home. We don't know anything, and this is the response we get from people in the media and politics.
With that said, I think there's a compromise here, and hear me out on this. So, Kavanaugh gets confirmed to the Supreme Court. Okay. Well, in return, we get to cut that pesky penis of his off.
What the hell?
Oh, if you want to see a fantastic takedown of Jimmy Kimmel, go and check out this video by Emperor Lemon. It's fantastic. This is the kind of dank content I need in my life. But anyways, as if things couldn't get even more wild, on September 23rd, Jane Mayer and Ronan Farrow over at The New Yorker released a report from yet another Kavanaugh accuser, Deborah Ramirez, who claimed that Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a dorm party by thrusting his penis in her face. This alleged incident occurred in 1983, when both Ramirez and Kavanaugh were freshmen at Yale University, and Kavanaugh was about 18 years old. And according to this report, the offices of at least 4 Democratic senators have received information about the allegation, and at least 2 have begun investigating it. Now here's the problem with this allegation, and it's mostly summed up by Ramirez's own attorney.
One of the suspicions that's been raised, obviously, about your client, which I want you to be able to respond to, is that it took Ms. Ramirez 6 days after she first talked to The New Yorker to actually name Brett Kavanaugh as the person who allegedly exposed himself to her. And that she consulted with attorneys. I'm not sure if it was with you directly. Can you explain why it took her 6 days?
She wanted to be very, very careful. It's 35 years old. She wanted to make sure that what she was actually going to be disclosing publicly was information that she could rely on and that she could stand by and that was accurate. With that passage of time, she went through those memories, and there There were some things that she believed were probably true, but she didn't disclose those because she wasn't completely convinced of their accuracy. So
the same thing was essentially repeated in the New Yorker report, where she states that she was at first hesitant to speak publicly, partly because her memories contained gaps, because she had been drinking at the time of the alleged incident. In her initial conversations with the New Yorker, she was reluctant to characterize Kavanaugh's role in the alleged incident with certainty. But after 6 days of carefully assessing her memories and consulting with her attorney, Ramirez said that she felt confident enough in her recollections to say that she remembers Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party, thrust his penis in her face, and caused her to touch it without her consent as she pushed him away. But there's more. The New Yorker contacted Ramirez after learning of her possible involvement in an incident involving Kavanaugh, and the allegation was conveyed to Democratic senators by a civil rights lawyer. The New Yorker has not confirmed with other eyewitnesses that Kavanaugh was present at the party. The magazine contacted several dozen classmates of Ramirez and Kavanaugh regarding the incident. Many did not respond to interview requests, others declined to comment, or said they did not attend or remember the party. Okay, so she couldn't remember the particulars of that night, and then went and talked to her friends, attorney, and senator about it for 6 days, and then she suddenly became confident about her memories again. This story isn't looking very credible either. Ramirez had not yet decided when and how she would convey the details of her allegation to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and she said that an FBI investigation of the matter was merited. Okay, so she doesn't know if she wants to testify, but yeah, let's get the FBI into this. As I stated before, the FBI does not do these things. The Senate Judiciary Committee investigates these things. But this whole issue ended up being more of a problem for the New Yorker, because it's regarded as a fairly well-respected magazine that usually doesn't just run stories that have no evidence to support them. In fact, in the entire report, this is the only piece of supportive evidence they had. A classmate of Ramirez, who declined to be identified because of the partisan battle over Kavanaugh's nomination, said that another student told him about the incident on either the night of the party or in the next day or two. The classmate said he is 100% sure that he was told at the time that Kavanaugh was the student who exposed himself to Ramirez. So this is literally their only piece of supportive evidence. Someone says he remembers someone else telling him about the incident. Their only piece of evidence is that some guy once heard a rumor. Oh, but it only gets better. Within the next week, Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer ran another follow-up piece on the Ramirez situation, where we find out that the anonymous person who supposedly heard about the incident from someone else wanted to stay anonymous because he was trying to get in contact with the person who told him about the incident in 1983. Well, he wasn't able to find the guy, and instead decided that he wanted to get in contact with the FBI itself and get on the record with what he knows and go public. Well, you know who was able to find the guy? Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer. The New Yorker reached the classmate, but he said that he had no memory of the incident. Okay, so the guy who this entire claim hinges on, the guy whose account is literally the basis for the only piece of supportive evidence, says he doesn't remember any of this. And they still ran with this story. In the words of Charles Cook, usually this would be the end of the inquiry. In fact, if there is any story to tell here, it is that a guy whose claims were marshaled in support of Ramirez's charge turned out to be completely unsupported. In any usual journalistic environment, this guy would be deemed useless as a result of this. Typically, this would be it. Typically, this guy's involvement in any subsequent story would be nil. Typically, he would be regarded as unreliable, and his other claims would be treated accordingly. Oh, but not for Farrow and Mayer. If you remember your high school English literature class, you might remember the word apophysis, which brings up a subject by means of denying it. So it's like saying, I'm totally not going to bring up the fact that my opponent likes watching hentai, because that would be a very cheap thing to do. So in the case of this New Yorker article, oh, well, it turns out that the supposed witness remembers nothing. So we totally won't talk about the fact that we previously thought he did say he heard about Kavanaugh penis slapping a girl in the face. Great work, guys. There is now legitimately zero evidence that corroborates Ramirez's story. Zero. The New York Times even tried to reach out to several dozen people in an attempt to corroborate Ramirez's story and could find no one with first-hand knowledge. And we already know from Ramirez herself that she said that she was drunk that night and told the reporters that she wasn't absolutely certain with her story. This is even less credible than Ford's story. And this New Yorker article goes even further still to impugn Kavanaugh's character by bringing up literal high school gossip from two former classmates, who claim in statements riddled with phrases like, the impression I formed, and seemed to be, and, while he might not be remembering the rhyme word for word, that Kavanaugh was just your average high school douchebag. They described Kavanaugh as part of a clique of high school athletes who routinely pick on less physically fit or popular students. He said that he never witnessed Kavanaugh physically attacking another student, but he recalled him doing nothing to stop the physical and verbal abuse. Hey, do you guys remember when the charges against Kavanaugh was that he attempted to rape a woman in 1982? Remember that? So now the scope of his charges have expanded to include that he was a high school douchebag, a college frat boy, he has white skin and a penis, he's part of the toxic patriarchy, he doesn't care enough about the feelings of others, he hires women with an unknown certain look, and what else was it? Oh yeah, he likes beer, has credit card debt, and is named Brett. Hey, do you guys remember when the charge against Kavanaugh was that he attempted to rape a woman in 1982? I hope you can all see the tactic that's going on here. If you can expand the scope of what you can charge someone as guilty with, it makes the original charge seem more credible. This is the smear campaign at work, and people still wonder why no one trusts the media. Hey, for all the people on the political left that are watching, do you guys still trust the media? Where do you guys find your credible sources? I'd really like to know how you're all dealing with this, if at all. But anyway, so now we have 2 allegations against Kavanaugh, both extremely questionable and lacking any hard corroborative evidence. But oh, hold on there, Juice Boy. NBC News came out on September 26th and said that they have obtained sworn and signed declarations from 4 people who corroborate Christine Blasey Ford's claims of sexual assault against Kavanaugh. Well, this is it, boys. Kavanaugh's done for. Except none of these 4 people actually corroborate her story. As Beckett Adams wrote in the Washington Examiner, Merriam-Webster defines the word corroborative as follows: to support with evidence or authority, make more certain. There are a lot of people in the news media business who don't seem to understand this. So let's dig into this article. So the first witness here is Ford's husband, who, as we already know, first heard about the incident at a couples therapy session in 2012. The second witness, who says she's known Ford for more than 10 years, claims she learned about the alleged incident in 2013. The third witness says that Ford told him about the attack in 2016. And the fourth witness says that Ford told her about it in 2017. None of this is corroborative evidence. You can't corroborate something that allegedly occurred in the early 1980s with sworn testimony recounting something you heard 30 plus years later. That's like saying everyone watching this video right now corroborates my claims that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand raped my butthole because I said it. That doesn't actually corroborate that it happened. That corroborates that I said it. This isn't actual corroborative evidence. We know nothing more about this allegation than we did when this incident first came up. But it doesn't really matter for the media. They'll run with this story, and they'll put the word corroborate in their titles. That doesn't make these statements not newsworthy, but they do not corroborate Ford's allegations. So now we can finally get to the big hearing day, right? Oh, not yet. See, back on September 23rd, when the Ramirez allegation came out, Michael Avenatti, otherwise known as Creepy Porn Lawyer, who was representing porn star Stormy Daniels.
Hey y'all, Stormy Daniels here. And remember, you can video chat with me live only on Camster, where I would love to tell you the real story about what happened. Maybe even with you know who. So don't forget, it's Camster, and I will see you there.
Came out in a tweet saying that he represents a woman with credible information regarding Judge Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. Well, on September 26th, we find out that this woman's name is Julie Swetnick, and she's claiming that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in a gang rape ring. We are aware of significant evidence of multiple house parties in the Washington, D.C. area during the early 1980s, during which Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, and others would participate in the targeting of women with alcohol/drugs in order to allow a train of men to subsequently gang rape them. There are multiple witnesses that will corroborate these facts, and each of them must be called to testify publicly. Now, the first problem with this new allegation is that the woman decided to go through Michael Avenatti, Creepy Porn Lawyer, the guy who's been trying to launch his presidential bid off the back of a porn star, where one of their lawsuits was seen as so frivolous in the eyes of Judge Otterow that he's now ordered Stormy Daniels to pay Trump almost $300,000 in legal fees. When you're a lawyer, it's your job to inform your client not to go ahead with lawsuits that have no chance at winning, and that may end up doing more damage to your client than it does to the person who the suit is filed against. And this was Avenatti's response to this judge's order. The amount in fees awarded to Stormy in the main NDA case will be at least $1 million more than this. Trump and his attorneys' attempt to fool the public about the importance of attorney's fees in the defamation case, which are a fraction of what they owe my client in the main NDA case, is an absolute joke. People are smarter than that. So his response to losing his client $325,000 is, yeah, we just lost $300,000, but we'll get over $1 million in this other case, which we still haven't won yet, and have no idea if we will win. Maybe? And the best part of this is Stormy Daniels claims that Michael Avenatti filed this specific lawsuit against my wishes, and that he has spoken on my behalf without my approval. She also says that he repeatedly refused to tell me how my legal defense budget was being spent, and that Michael has not treated me with the respect and deference an attorney should show to a client. And now he has launched a new crowdfunding campaign using my face and name without my permission and attributing words to me that I have never wrote or said. So if this is true, then he just robbed his client of nearly $300,000 just so he could continue to get his name out there and attack President Trump off of Stormy Daniels' back. And aside from all this, Michael Avenatti has also in the past claimed to have possession of a DVD which supposedly shows President Trump's former sexual escapades. Or something, we're not sure, and we haven't heard anything about this DVD for months now. And he's also claimed in the past that he has knowledge of 3 other women who have been paid off by Trump and that he was going to reveal, but then nothing came of that either. But he sure wasn't afraid to make all of this public and create a spectacle around himself. So the medium of Michael Avenatti to be bringing your gang rape accusations to is a bit sketchy to start off with. Oh, and breaking news, Michael Avenatti is no longer representing Stormy Daniels. Huh. Oh, and more breaking news, Michael Avenatti is being arrested for trying to extort Nike. Huh. And he's also got 36 federal charges against him, including stealing millions of dollars from his clients, skirting taxes, committing wire fraud, perjury, and other financial crimes. Huh.
All of my sexual fantasies involve handcuffs.
Creepy porn lawyer, great to see you.
But then after Michael Avenatti revealed his information about a third accuser, he decides to go on Twitter and post this. Here is a picture of my client Julie Swetnick. She is courageous, brave, and honest. We ask that her privacy and that of her family be respected. That's a pretty weird way to be asking for privacy. Here's my name and here's a picture of my face, and now I'm going to put it on the internet and please respect my privacy. Okay? But here's what Julie Swetnick herself had to say in her declaration. My name is Julie Swetnick and I am a resident of Washington, D.C. I fully understand the seriousness of the statements contained within this declaration. I have personal knowledge of the information stated herein and if called to testify to the same, would and could do so. And then she goes off to list places she's worked for in the past, including places within the federal government and various government security clearances she's held. And then she states that I first met Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh in approximately 1980 to 1981. I was introduced to them at a house party that I attended in the Washington, D.C. area. I observed Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh as extremely close friends during the early 1980s when I knew them and interacted with them. I would describe them as joined at the hip, and I consistently saw them together in many social settings. There is no question in my mind that Mark Judge has significant information concerning the conduct of Brett Kavanaugh during the 1980s, especially as it relates to his actions towards women. Following that first introduction, I attended well over 10 house parties in the Washington, D.C. area during the years 1981 to 1983, where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. These parties were a common occurrence in the area and occurred nearly every weekend during the school year. On numerous occasions at these parties, I witnessed Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh drink excessively and engage in highly inappropriate conduct, including being overly aggressive with girls and not taking no for an answer. This conduct included the fondling and grabbing of girls without their consent. I observed Brett Kavanaugh drink excessively at many of these parties and engage in abusive and physically aggressive behavior towards girls, including pressing girls against him without their consent, grinding against girls, and attempting to remove or shift girls' clothing to expose private body parts. I likewise observed him be verbally abusive towards girls by making crude sexual comments to them that were designed to demean, humiliate, and embarrass them. I also witnessed Brett Kavanaugh behave as a mean drunk on many occasions at these parties. And then she goes on to say that during the years 1981 to 1982, I became aware of efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to spike the punch at house parties I attended, with drugs and or grain alcohol so as to cause girls to lose their inhibitions and their ability to say no. This caused me to make an effort to purposely avoid the punch at these parties. I witnessed efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to target particular girls so they could be taken advantage of. I also witnessed efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to cause girls to become inebriated and disoriented so they could then be gang raped in the side room or bedroom by a train of numerous boys. I have a firm recollection of seeing boys lined up outside rooms of many of these parties waiting for their turn with a girl inside the room. These boys included Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh. In approximately 1982, I became the victim of one of these gang or train rapes, where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. Shortly after the incident, I shared what had transpired with at least 2 other people. During the incident, I was incapacitated without my consent and unable to fight off the boys raping me. I believe I was drugged using Quaaludes or something similar placed in what I was drinking. I am aware of other witnesses that can attest to the truthfulness of each of the statements above. Okay, so is this true? I mean, she's claiming here that she was present for well over 10 of these gang rape house parties, which occurred nearly every weekend, which were all public events with dozens of witnesses present, which she also consistently decided to go back to, where she herself was even raped at one of these parties. If you know that gang rapes are occurring at a party, if you yourself were even raped at one of these parties, Why would you keep going back to these parties? She doesn't mention any of the weekends these parties supposedly took place on. She doesn't mention if she was even coerced into going to these parties. We don't even know the locations of these parties. We know nothing. Even the New York Times reported that none of Ms. Swetnick's claims could be independently corroborated by the New York Times, and her lawyer, Michael Avenatti, declined to make her available for an interview. Ms. Swetnick offered no explanation in her statement of how she came to attend the parties she did, nor did she identify other people who could verify her account. And in response to these allegations by Swetnick, over 60 of Kavanaugh's former classmates from Georgetown Prep and other women from sister schools signed a letter to rebut the allegations and all deny ever having met her. We never witnessed any behavior that even approaches what is described in this allegation. It is reprehensible. Brett Kavanaugh is a good man. He has always treated women with respect and decency. But of course, Michael Avenatti and Julie Swetnick both demanded an FBI inquiry, which for the last time, the Senate Judiciary Committee investigates these things. They literally send out investigators to go and talk to witnesses and investigate. They do more than the FBI is allowed to do in these situations. But here, as in the Deborah Ramirez situation, there is no evidence corroborating anything. I already said how the New York Times couldn't corroborate anything. Well, the Wall Street Journal also attempted to corroborate Ms. Swetnick's account, contacting dozens of former classmates and colleagues, but couldn't reach anyone with knowledge of her allegations. No friends have come forward to publicly support her claims. We have nothing. So that's it, right? We can get to this hearing now? Nope, not yet. There's another accuser out there. This time an anonymous accuser who sent a letter to Republican Senator Cory Gardner on September 22nd. Dear Cory Gardner, I will remain anonymous, but I feel obligated to inform you of this 1998 incident involving Brett Kavanaugh. When he was author of the Star Report, my daughter occasionally socialized with Brett Kavanaugh. She and a group of 4, including Kavanaugh, met in a Washington, D.C. bar. Her friend was dating him. When they left the bar under the influence of alcohol, they were all shocked when Brett Kavanaugh shoved her friend up against the wall very aggressively and sexually. There were at least 4 witnesses, including my daughter. Her friend, still traumatized, called my daughter yesterday wondering what to do about it. They decided to remain anonymous. This letter is written about an unknown person and their unknown daughter and her unknown friends in an unknown bar in Washington, D.C. in an unknown time in 1998 who all apparently want to remain anonymous. And that's it. This is just crap. There is nothing here. We have no evidence. There is nothing to do with this letter. The person who sent it clearly has no intention of doing anything with it, just throwing out more uncorroborated accusations to further smear Kavanaugh's name. So now that we have all this stuff leading up to the big hearing day, let's talk about how the Republicans had no plan going into this hearing. Because up until this point, we have had no clear standard for what the burden of proof is supposed to be. We already know that the Democratic senators don't care about the idea of presumption of innocence or the actual evidence surrounding any of the allegations. They've been making that clear every day.
There's no presumption of innocence or guilt when you have a nominee before you.
And by the way, this is not a criminal proceeding. People keep talking about presumption of innocence. That is a term one uses in a criminal proceeding.
So what's the standard that the Republicans are setting? They don't have one. There is no established standard here as to what needs to be proved in order to either acquit Kavanaugh from the charges against him or to drop him as a Supreme Court nominee. We're basically just going with the standard that Chuck Schumer said here, that there is no presumption of innocence and no one is guilty or innocent. Which, if we're not interested in uncovering any actual evidence surrounding any of the allegations, then we're just going to be looking at what people have said or say about the parties involved. It's going to turn into a game of just discrediting the characters of both Ford and Kavanaugh to see who is most trustworthy, when that shouldn't be the standard at all. The standard should be, is there any evidence that any of these allegations have actually taken place? Which to this present day, there is nothing. This is why we keep hearing so much about Kavanaugh's high school buddies, and that he was a douchebag frat boy in college who drinks beer and racks up credit card debt and likes women to look a certain way, and that he's an evil white penis person. None of these charges have anything to do with any piece of evidence that corroborates any accuser's story. I mean, Joe Biden was decent enough back in 1991 to set down the standard of presumption of innocence for Clarence Thomas.
As I said from the beginning, this is about whether or not sexual harassment occurred. And lastly, Judge, with me from the beginning and at this moment until the end, the presumption is with you.
When you do not have this, and your standard is, well, there is no presumption of innocence for anyone. This isn't a legal proceeding. Screw your presumption of innocence values. You can make anyone guilty or innocent based on whatever the hell you want. We will then be dealing with the subjective and personal opinions of everyone in the Senate Judiciary Committee, the media, and the public. When you do not have the standard of presumption of innocence, everyone is free to believe whatever wild accusation they want, no matter if there is any evidence to support any allegation. And in this situation, it's extremely crucial to analyze all the available evidence, because Kavanaugh is now being accused of being some kind of serial gang rapist. I mean, if that's true, then he shouldn't even have his job at the DC Circuit anymore. This man stands to lose everything from these allegations, which have no corroborative evidence. And this is the question. Are evidence-free allegations on their own enough to completely ruin a guy's career and destroy his name? This unconstrained position is summed up perfectly by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
So every time you hear on Fox News, oh, innocent, assume you're innocent, you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They're trying to confuse voters. They're trying to confuse people across this country. That is not what this is about. This is about, do you believe he's honest? Do you believe he has the character to have a lifetime appointment? Do you think his story isn't adding up? The fact that his college roommate said that he would come home drunken and he would come home belligerent. The fact that he said about Ms. Ramirez, and this is again, Brett Kavanaugh's college roommate said, I believe her because she has the kind of personality. She was kind. She was thoughtful. She couldn't imagine her making this up. That's called corroborating evidence. It's things you hear and listen to and then assess, who do I believe? That's your job. And based on hearing from these two women, these strong, credible women, and their stories and all the corroborating evidence, I believe them.
All right, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Do people seem believable? Did someone say something nice about the person making the accusations? Do people seem honest? Do people seem to have good character? Are these women strong and seem credible? Which, that last line,
all the corroborating evidence.
Yeah, there is no corroborating evidence here. Kirsten Gillibrand is the one confusing people here. Every single one of her standards are as subjective as it gets and have absolutely nothing to do with showing whether or not there is any evidence to support the accusations made by these women. They only have to do with the people who have made the accusations, and that can go as far as it wants to. This is the mindset that allows for people to freely and without any doubt in their mind say things like believe all women and woman would never lie, because we have no standard here. Our standard isn't based on any evidence surrounding the charges, it's just the believability of the women themselves. And the failure of Republicans to establish this guideline based on actual evidence surrounding the allegations is part of the reason why the hearings didn't go as well as they could have for Kavanaugh. As I previously stated in an article by Ala Pundit, all Ford has to do is prove that she believes that it happened, not that it actually happened, and Kavanaugh will end up damaged. Because that's the standard we've established here. The burden of proof lies wherever anyone wants it to be. And this problem follows through to the next issue, which is that the Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee knew what the optics were going to look like if they themselves were to directly question Ford. Evil white Republican men pounce on poor survivor with evil white questions that show no respect to rape victims because men can't sympathize with women because men! We've been hearing this narrative for years now. If the Republicans decided to ask Ford questions on their own, that's what the headlines are going to be. And the Democrats and the media were already hammering Republicans on the committee about this. Christine Blasey Ford's Republican inquisitors will all be men. Republican men, and not a single GOP woman will be Christine Blasey Ford's interrogators on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee questioning Kavanaugh and Ford has a serious gender problem. So instead of asking her questions directly, the Republicans decided they were going to bring on an Arizona prosecutor named Rachel Mitchell, a woman, to question Ford and Kavanaugh. She's a registered Republican and has been working in the Maricopa County's attorney's office for the last 26 years, and has spent the last 12 years in charge of the Sex Crimes Bureau. Now, of course, this didn't stop some Democrats from pointing out the obvious.
But it should be very obvious to the people of our country by now that the Republicans do not want to question Dr. Ford directly because they will reveal who they are, and I think they're afraid of that.
So it's evil sexist old white men if the Republican senators question Ford, and it's also evil sexist old white men if they have a female prosecutor question Ford for them. There's no winning here, guys. This is how it always goes. But anyway, since the Republicans haven't established what the main guideline here is supposed to be with regards to where the burden of proof is, the prosecutor from Arizona also had to rely on questions that didn't have much to do with the actual alleged incidents over the credibility of Ford and Kavanaugh, which finally gets us to the big hearing day.
For the first time, we will hear publicly from Christine Blasey Ford.
Detail her allegations of sexual assault.
Happening in the wake of the Me Too movement. Most anticipated hearing in recent
The
memory.
mood here today, ready and focused.
I am here because I believe it is my civic duty.
I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
Brett and Mark were visibly drunk.
I was not at the party described by Dr. Ford.
Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes.
Nonsense. Reported breathlessly. This confirmation process has become a national disgrace.
I believed he was going to rape me.
My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed.
Brett got on top of me.
This is a circus.
And I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me.
Without any standard for proof, this entire hearing just became an emotional assessment of the two parties involved. Who seems more credible? So, unfortunately, that's how this is going to have to be analyzed, because these hearings uncovered no more evidence of the alleged incident than we already knew, and only centered on issues that brought into question personal character. So in the case of Ford, the question surrounding her now became, is she politically motivated? Is she lying? Is she not lying? Did her presentation at the hearing look and sound believable? Were those real tears? Nothing to do with the allegation, which makes the entire analysis of the situation extremely disingenuous and dishonest from the side of the public. But if personal credibility is the standard, then that's how we're going to have to proceed here. And we'll start with Ford, because the Kavanaugh analysis has its own problems. So if we're looking to determine the credibility of a person, then we have to look at the various discrepancies presented in the hearing. Because the things she said today and the questions asked didn't really do much against her main allegation over just questioning her credibility. If you remember from before, when Ford first came out publicly with her allegations in the Washington Post, the article itself said that the Washington Post was provided and reviewed portions of Ford's therapist notes. Well, during her questioning, Ford couldn't seem to remember exactly whether those therapist notes were handed over to the Post or not.
Did you show a full or partial set of those marriage therapy records to the Washington Post?
I don't remember. I remember summarizing for her what they said. So I'm not quite sure if I actually gave her the record.
Okay. So it's possible that the reporter did not see these notes.
I don't know if I can't recall whether she saw them directly or if I just told her what they said.
Okay, well the article clearly states that she did give them the record, so is she just not remembering? Is she lying? We don't know here. Now before someone comes up and starts saying that she perjured herself here, in order to meet the legal definition of perjury in this country, you must knowingly be saying things which you know to be untrue. Like you have to intentionally be lying. Because another thing people in the media and various commentators kept doing with these hearings was claiming that every discrepancy in anyone's story is just perjury. Well, no, there is an actual legal standard for perjury here, and no one really met that standard throughout this entire hearing. Because there were a lot of claims about perjury, and I'm not about to get into those because no one perjured themselves during these hearings. So I'm just getting rid of that argument with regards to the two testimonies. But now back to Ford, another issue leading up to this hearing was that Christine Blasey Ford supposedly had a fear of flying, which was part of the reason why the establishment of a hearing date took so long. Because as far as we knew at the time, Ford was actually going to drive across the country from California to DC. And this fear of flying was cited by her lawyers as one of the reasons why she couldn't testify earlier on a previous Monday deadline, which conveniently allowed for an expanded timeline where we can get all these other accusations to come in and have media smear pieces against Kavanaugh. But as we found out, her fear of flying hasn't actually stopped her from flying before, especially in coming over to the East Coast on a yearly basis and for going on recreational and work-related trips.
May I ask, Dr. Ford, how did you get to Washington?
In an airplane.
Okay. I asked that because it's been reported by the press that you would not submit to an interview with the committee because of your fear of flying. Is that true?
Well, I was hoping that they would come to me, but then realized that was an unrealistic request.
When you were here in the mid-Atlantic area back in August, end of July, August, how did you get here?
Also by airplane. I come here once a year during the summer to visit my family.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not here. I go to Delaware.
Okay. Thanks. In fact, you fly fairly frequently for your hobbies, and you've had to fly for your work. Is that true?
Correct, unfortunately.
I also saw on your CV that you list the following interests of surf travel, and you, in parentheses, put Hawaii, Costa Rica, South Pacific Islands, and French Polynesia. Have you been all to those places?
Correct.
By airplane?
Yes.
And your interests also include oceanography, Hawaiian and Tahitian culture. Did you travel by air as a part of those interests?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, one of the responses to this was, okay, who the hell cares about whether or not she fears flying? People can fear flying and still fly. Yeah, that's true. But as already noted, this goes more towards how this entire process up until this hearing date was manipulated. And this brings us to the topic of Ford's lawyers. So one of the things revealed in this hearing from Ford herself was how she came about getting these lawyers sitting next to her here.
Did anybody besides friends and family refer you to any attorneys?
I think that the staff of Dianne Feinstein's office suggested the possibility of some attorneys.
Which of your two lawyers did Senator Feinstein's office recommend?
The Katz.
I'm sorry?
The Katz firm.
Okay.
It's my understanding that some of my team is working on a pro bono basis, but I don't know the exact details. And
have you been provided?
I think I can help you with that. Both her counsel are doing this pro bono. We are not being paid, and we have no expectation of being paid.
Thank you, counsel.
So here we get to know some pretty important information. None of these guys are working for Ford for any money. And Dianne Feinstein's staff, or Dianne Feinstein herself by proxy of her staff, advised Ford specifically to hire on these two ladies here, who are from the Katz, Marshall, and Banks law firm. We also found out later that this guy to Ford's left resigned from his job where he was a senior counsel just to come along and help represent Ford. He claims that he resigned due to objections within the law firm to him representing Ford. Now, it's also interesting to note that this guy also represents the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who was fired last March by former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He was also picked by President Obama in 2012 to reform the regulation of offshore drilling after the Deepwater Horizon spill, and has done work investigating the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s. So he does have some connections with Democrats in the government, as well as these two ladies. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. You can be a Democratic partisan and still feel the need to represent someone whose case you believe in, as many lawyers do pro bono, and you can both share a common goal of keeping Kavanaugh off the Supreme Court. But then we learned on October 1st that these two lawyers here were also going to go to a fundraising event for Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin's re-election campaign. Please join Deborah Katz, Lisa Banks, and End Citizens United for cocktails and conversations with U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. Now, as soon as word got out about this fundraiser and who was going to be attending, it was immediately canceled, which seems a little suspicious. You're not just inviting these two specific lawyers for no reason, you're inviting them so they can talk about their role in this Kavanaugh debacle and make some campaign money off this entire situation. Also, Deborah Katz seems to have a history of defending Democratic politicians such as Al Franken and even Bill Clinton during his own sexual harassment allegations. Yeah, Bill Clinton, the man who has way more corroborative evidence against him with his accusers than Ford does. So these lawyers have a history. And also, back on September 20th, we found out that Christine Blasey Ford was being advised by a woman named Ricky Seidman, who has been a lifelong Democratic operative working her way from being an assistant to Senator Ted Kennedy, working on the Walter Mondale campaign, Michael Dukakis campaign, Bill Clinton's campaign, Bill Clinton's assistant to the president, and then Senator Joe Biden's communications director during the 2008 Obama campaign. She's also been involved as the chief investigator for the Senate Labor and Human Resources Committee, where she worked against the nominations of Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. And she also advised President Obama during his nomination of Sonia Sotomayor to the Supreme Court. And she also happened to be the one who solicited Anita Hill to come forward with her sexual harassment claims against Clarence Thomas, and prepped her for her testimony to the Senate. And now Ford has hired on the same Democratic operative to advise her through this process. If you think this all sounds kind of partisan, you're not alone. Now, what makes all this with her legal team and the Katz law firm lawyers more interesting goes back to what Ford said in the statement on her fear of flying.
You would not submit to an interview with the committee because of your fear of flying. Is that true?
Well, I was hoping that they would come to me, but then realized that was an unrealistic request.
She had hoped they could come to her, but realized that that was an unrealistic request. Remember earlier in the video when I mentioned a statement by Senator Grassley saying that they offered her the choice of testifying in either a public or closed session of the hearing? Well, listen to this next clip.
Was it communicated to you by your counsel or someone else that the committee had asked to interview you and that they offered to come out to California to do so?
We're going to object, Mr. Chairman, to any call for privileged conversations between counsel and Dr. Ford. It's a privileged conversation.
Could you validate the fact that the offer was made without her saying a word?
Is it possible for that question to be answered without violating any consul relationships?
Can I say something to you? Do you mind if I say something to you directly?
Yeah.
I just appreciate that you did offer that. I wasn't clear on what the offer was. If you were going to come out to see me, I would have happily hosted you and had been happy to speak with you out there. I just did not, it wasn't clear to me that that was the case.
So now she claims that she wasn't clear that she even had the option of having investigators come to California and interview her there, which is interesting because she just said that she hoped that they could come to her. Well, they did offer to come to her, so what the hell? Either she had no idea about this offer or her lawyers weren't telling her about this offer. Because if we take the premise that her lawyers are in some way Democratic operatives here, what's the best outcome for them with the Ford accusations? That they could push the hearing date back as far as they could to avoid having Ford testify, and then get a TV spectacle to fuel this entire nomination controversy, and possibly get the opportunity for a months-long FBI investigation, which would then push the hearing date back past the midterm elections in the hopes that the Democrats win the Senate so they don't have to vote on Kavanaugh. As Timothy Carney notes in the Washington Examiner, what do you think was better for Democrats' politics here? A quiet deposition of sorts, or a huge spectacle on cable television? The bigger the spectacle, the longer delay, the better it is for Democrats and the worse it is for Ford. Why would they turn down an offer to save their client from all this stress, anxiety, and public scrutiny? Why would they refuse Grassley's offer to give Ford exactly the sort of venue she wanted? Ford says here that she wanted a private meeting in California, but it seems like something or other convinced her that that was an unrealistic request. So did her lawyers deliberately not make this clear to her? Were they deliberately trying to get this public display? Dianne Feinstein thought it would be a good idea to hold on to these allegations for 6 weeks. How much could have been figured out in that time? Well, I guess we'll never find out, but on October 23rd, Judicial Watch filed a complaint against Ford's lawyers alleging that they didn't actually tell Ford that she had the option of being interviewed in private in California, which could have done something to prevent her from facing a public spectacle and letters of harassment. As stated in the complaint, it appears likely that they knowingly subordinated their client's interests in avoiding the publicity of a Senate hearing and avoiding travel to Washington, D.C. to the desire of Democratic senators on the committee to have such a hearing take place in Washington, D.C. Their failure to inform their client of the offer to have committee staff investigate Dr. Ford in California was dishonest at worst and careless at best. Either way, it is inexcusable and raises substantial questions about their character and fitness to practice law. It warrants a full investigation by the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. Now, the lawyers responded to this by saying that they did inform Dr. Ford, but also that we were never told that Senator Grassley was willing personally to fly to California to meet with Dr. Ford, and that is how she understood his ambiguous question at the hearing. Okay, well, that's not really the claim here. I mean, we have access to a letter sent by Grassley on September 19th to Ford's lawyers specifically saying, "My staff would still welcome the opportunity to speak with Dr. Ford at a time and place convenient to her." And we also know of an email sent to Ms. Katz saying that the chairman has offered the ability for Dr. Ford to testify in an open session, a closed session, a public staff interview, and a private staff interview. The chairman is even willing to fly female staff investigators to meet Dr. Ford and you in California or anywhere else to obtain Dr. Ford's testimony. And then on September 22nd, we have another email saying that committee investigators are available to meet with Dr. Ford anywhere and any time if she would prefer to provide her testimony outside of a hearing setting. Grassley was also tweeting at the time, "Come to us or we to you." So this was being offered to Ford and in public documents. Not sure that the "we were never told anything" argument is going to hold up here, but I'm also not sure that anything substantial is going to end up coming out of this complaint. But that's just some of the thoughts on the lawyers and possible Democratic motives here with regards to these initial discrepancies by Ford. Now, aside from these discrepancies at the hearing, we also found out about a new letter obtained by Fox News and sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee that comes courtesy of Ford's ex-boyfriend, who wrote a letter under penalty of perjury and claims that while he was dating Ford from 1992 to 1998, he saw Ford going to great lengths to help a woman he believed was her lifelong best friend prepare for a potential polygraph test, and that Ford was able to do this using her background in psychology. He also added that the woman, Monica McLean, had been interviewing for jobs with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Monica McLean was also one of the women named in a signed letter of support for Ford by her former high school classmates. And he also goes on to state that during the years they were dating, Ford never mentioned a fear of flying, even while aboard a propeller plane, and that she never expressed a fear of closed quarters, tight spaces, or places with only one exit. And with this information, Senator Grassley sent yet another letter to Ford stating that the Senate Judiciary Committee has received a sworn statement from a longtime boyfriend of Dr. Ford's, stating that he personally witnessed Dr. Ford coaching a friend on polygraph examinations. When asked under oath in the hearing whether she'd given any tips or advice to someone who was planning on taking a polygraph, Dr. Ford replied, "Never." The statement raises specific concerns about the reliability of her polygraph examination results. The Senate therefore needs this information. Which, if true, that Ford has helped someone in the past take a polygraph test, that her knowledge of how to go about taking these tests could have also affected how she performed during her own polygraph test.
Have you ever had discussions with anyone besides your attorneys on how to take a polygraph?
Never.
And I don't just mean countermeasures, but I mean just any sort of tips or anything like that.
No, I was scared of the test itself, but was comfortable that I could tell the information and the test would reveal whatever it was going to reveal. I didn't expect it to be as long as it was going to be, so it was a little bit stressful.
Have you ever given tips or advice to somebody who was looking to take a polygraph test?
Never.
And this is the other thing. Ford hasn't actually given the committee any of the evidence that she has. She hasn't given them her therapist notes, she hasn't given them any video or audio recordings from her polygraph test, and she hasn't given them anything aside from what's already publicly available. In fact, she isn't even aware if there is audio or video recordings from her polygraph test. But if you'll recall, we have a photo of Ford taking this polygraph back in August. Was this photograph taken by someone? Is this a screenshot from an actual video and audio recording during her polygraph test? Someone took this photo. We don't know.
Did you, we touched on it earlier, did you know that the committee has requested not only the charts from the polygraph test, but also any audio or video recording of the polygraph test?
No.
Okay. Were you audio and video recorded when you were taking that test?
Okay, so I remember being hooked up to a machine, like being placed onto my body, and being asked a lot of questions and crying a lot. That's my primary memory of that test. I don't know. I know he took laborious detail into explaining what he was going to be doing, but I was just focused on kind of what I was going to say and my fear about that. I wasn't listening to every detail about whether it was audio or video recorded.
Well, you were in a hotel room, right?
Correct.
Regular hotel room with a bed and bathroom?
No. It was a conference room. So I was sitting at a chair and he was behind me.
Did you note any cameras in the room?
Well, he had a computer set up, so I guess I assumed that he was somehow taping and recording me.
Okay, so you assumed you were being video and audio recorded?
Correct.
But you don't know for sure?
I don't know for sure.
Okay.
This image didn't just appear out of nowhere, but at this point I guess we'll never find out. So now we also have this discrepancy in Ford's story. Your continued withholding of material evidence despite multiple requests is unacceptable, as the Senate exercises its constitutional responsibility of advice and consent for a judicial nomination. If you are serious about the allegations you are making against someone, if you are serious about stopping the nomination of an individual to the Supreme Court, wouldn't you want to be giving everyone as much evidence that you have as possible? If you have all this information in your possession, proving your credibility, and possibly laying some guilt down on Kavanaugh, why aren't you giving that to the committee? Is the evidence not good enough? Does it hurt Ford more than it helps? Well, we don't know, because the committee never obtained this information. In fact, once again, the Ford team declared that they will only hand over the documents to the FBI. Ah yes, the super serious police who have less investigative powers and authority than the Senate. Which is another strange thing too, right? Because Grassley could just subpoena Ford's team to obtain these documents. The committee has this power. Now, whether or not that will be a politically smart thing to do is its own question. But the committee did not end up sending out a subpoena on these documents. I don't know what other inference we should draw from your refusal, but that the withheld evidence does not support Dr. Ford's allegations in quite the way you have claimed. Now back to this letter from her ex-boyfriend, it also stated that Ford was cheating on him while they were living in Hawaii, and that she was also continuing to use his credit card and making purchases of up to $600, which she supposedly denied using until he threatened to get fraud prevention involved. Now, one of this letter's claims, that Ford expressed no fear of close quarters, tight spaces, or places with only one exit, goes to another point raised by Ford in her original statement to the Washington Post and in her testimony to the committee.
I had never told the details to anyone, the specific details, until May 2012 during a couples counseling session. The reason this came up in counseling is that my husband and I had completed a very extensive, very long remodel of our home, and I insisted on a second front door, an idea that he and others disagreed with and could not understand. In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail.
So one of the main reasons for this original 2012 couples therapy session is that Ford and her husband were arguing over the addition of a second front door to their house. Now, when you hear that, you'd think that this couples therapy session must have been taking place around the same time that they were trying to get this front door built, right? Well, Paul Sperry over at Real Clear Investigations obtained documents of the renovations that have taken place on her property, and found out that the permits for those renovations were issued on February 4th, 2008, more than 4 years before the May 2012 therapy session. The documents also note that all of the remodeling for this additional room and exterior door was completed by February 2010, with the only renovations past that point being for stuff like solar panels, solar hot water system, and an electric vehicle charging station, all of which were issued after 2012. So at the very latest here, these arguments over a second front door, which prompted this therapy session, occurred over 2 years after all of these major renovations were finished to the house. And you should also note that this addition to her house wasn't actually something to be used by Ford and her husband. It was to be rented out to tenants, which is the reason for the second front door.
So for me personally, anxiety, phobia, and PTSD-like symptoms are the types of things that I've been coping with. So more specifically, claustrophobia, panic, and that type of thing.
Is that the reason for the second door, front door?
Correct.
Is claustrophobia?
Correct. It doesn't. Our house does not look aesthetically pleasing from the curb.
I see. And do you have that second front door?
Yes. It now is a place to host Google interns because we live near Google, so we get to and other students can live.
So Ford's claim that the second front door was installed for claustrophobia doesn't really seem to make any sense here. She won't be using that front door if she's renting this room out to people. The door was not an escape route, but an entrance route, said an attorney familiar with the ongoing congressional investigation. It appears the real plan for the second front door was to rent out a separate room. Renters and a business operating out of Dr. Ford's home would explain the added door, he said. Clearly, there were business purposes for it, not just ones related to her anxieties. If she rents out the room to Google employees, how does she get access to the second door to escape a perceived attacker? It's also interesting to note that when Ford bought the house in 2007, its previous owner was a licensed psychotherapist and marriage counselor who specializes in, quote, disturbing memories from the past. Is this the same woman who conducted the 2012 therapy session? When contacted, the woman just said, I don't want to be mentioned. She said, it's personal. And when contacted by Thomas Lipscomb, she just said, I'm a couples therapist. To date, we have no idea who conducted this 2012 couples therapy session. So now we have another discrepancy from her statement in the documents relating to the remodeling of her home, as well as some other bits of information from her past regarding her phobias and helping someone prepare for a polygraph test. We also seem to get some more drama with Ford's lifelong friend Leland Kaiser, after Ford seemingly disregarded her friend's denial of the accusations by saying she has significant health challenges.
Are you aware that the three people at the party besides yourself and Brett Kavanaugh have given statements under penalty of felony to the committee?
Yes.
And are you aware of what those statements say?
Yes.
Are you aware that they say that they have no memory or knowledge of such a party?
Yes.
Do you have any particular motives to ascribe to Leland?
Leland has significant health challenges, and I'm happy that she's focusing on herself and getting the health treatment that she needs. And she let me know that she needed her lawyer to take care of this for her, and she texted me right afterward with an apology and good wishes and etc. So I'm glad that she's taking care of herself.
Now this really pissed off Kaiser's family, or at least someone very close to Kaiser, who said that during this whole time, Christine didn't even give her so much as a heads up. As far as I know, they haven't really spoken for several years, and they're certainly not close anymore. Leland was completely blindsided by her name being thrown into it all. The first thing she knew about it was when she woke up on Thursday morning and her name was just everywhere. And the Daily Mail also reported that the family expressed anger at Ford's suggestion that Kaiser could not recall the party because of significant health challenges she has faced in recent years. Speaking in her defense, Kaiser's loved one noted, "I think it's quite convenient that she named the person who is frankly probably the least physically capable of all of them to stand up and be subjected to questioning or give her account. Leland is not a well woman. She has had years of injuries that I've seen her have 14 operations on her neck and back. She just wants to get better." It really felt a lot like Christine was the one called to the principal's office to give an account of something and just threw her under the bus. You know, just reached for a name. So this didn't really go over well with Kaiser and her family. I guess we can cross off lifelong friend from the description now. But that's not all from Kaiser. Apparently, when she was interviewed by the FBI, she told the investigators that she felt pressured by one of Ford's friends to revisit her initial statement that she knew nothing about the alleged incident, and that this pressuring was what resulted in Kaiser saying that while she didn't know anything, she still believed in Ford's allegations. The Wall Street Journal reported that Leland Kaiser told investigators that Ford's friend, former FBI agent Monica McLean, had urged her to alter the original statement that she gave about not remembering any such party and not knowing Kavanaugh. Now, if you remember the name Monica McLean from just a few minutes ago, that's the same person that Ford supposedly helped prepare for a polygraph test. And note, she is a former FBI agent. They're kind of trained in pressuring people to do or say things. But Monica McLean's lawyer came out and denied the claims of pressuring, stating that any notion or claim that Miss McLean pressured Leland Kaiser to alter Miss Kaiser's account of what she recalled concerning the alleged incident between Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh is absolutely false. The Wall Street Journal also reported that the FBI sent the White House and Senate an additional package of information that included text messages from Miss McLean to Miss Kaiser, according to a person familiar with the matter, and that Kaiser's statement to the FBI provided a glimpse into how Dr. Ford's allies were working behind the scenes to lobby old classmates to bolster their versions of the alleged incident. So aside from all the discrepancies, there definitely seems to be some weird activities going on behind the scenes with the people working for Ford. But that's about it with Ford's testimony. Now on to Kavanaugh's testimony. So aside from the obvious rage, which we'll get to later, he seems to be the only one here to actually have some sort of evidence from 1982 that can at least attempt to vindicate him in some way, which is the calendar that he's kept since that time, which details nearly every engagement he was involved in. But along with this came certain charges by the senators on the committee to try and find some sort of hidden rapey meanings within his yearbook, which resulted in moments such as Senator Sheldon Whitehouse asking him about the meaning of the word boof.
Have you, I don't know if it's boofed or boofed, how do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay. And so when your friend Mark Judge said put the same thing in his yearbook page back to you, he had the same meaning. It was flatulence.
I don't know what he did, but that's my recollection. We want to talk about flatulence at age 16 on a yearbook page. I'm game.
Yes, we are super serious people taking these allegations super seriously, so we're talking about farts. Oh, we also get some talk about Renee Dolphin.
You mentioned, I think, the Renata, I don't know how you pronounce that. That's the proper name of an individual, you know?
Renata.
Renata? It's spelled with an E at the end, R-E-N-A-T-E. Is that
correct?
Okay. And then after that is the word alumnius. What does the word alumnius mean in that context?
I explained that in my opening statement. She was a great friend of ours. A bunch of us went to dances with her. She hung out with us as a group. The media circus that has been generated by this thought and reported that it referred to sex. It did not. Never had any, as she herself said on the record, any kind of sexual interaction with her. And I'm sorry how that's been misinterpreted, and sorry about that, as I explained in my opening statement, because she's a good person. And to have her name dragged through this hearing is a joke and really an embarrassment.
So the story with this girl, Renee Dolphin, is that supposedly the guys at Georgetown Prep would speak very disrespectfully of her, at least verbally, according to one former student at the time, and that the guys would write about how they were Renee alumni, with one poem entry in a yearbook saying, "You need a date, and it's getting late, so don't hesitate to call Renee." The implication being that this girl must have been pretty easy to get with or something. Now for the senators on the panel and the media, they took this to imply that everyone on the football team has had sex with her at some point, or some sort of group sex. Which, if true, I still don't know what this has to do with the allegations presented against Kavanaugh by Ford. But let's keep going. In Kavanaugh's yearbook, her name is mentioned as Renate Alumnus, which according to Kavanaugh's lawyer, Judge Kavanaugh and Miss Dolphin attended one high school event together and shared a brief kiss goodnight following that event. They had no other such encounter. The language from Judge Kavanaugh's high school yearbook refers to the fact that he and Miss Dolphin attended that one high school event together and nothing else. And a similar response was given by 4 of Kavanaugh's former classmates who said that Renate alumni was simply a reference to having gone on an innocent date with Renate at some point. But then Renate herself came out and said, I think Brett must have me confused with someone else, because I never kissed him. What is the use of any of this with regards to Ford's allegations? You decide, America. But again, what is happening here? What do these senators think they're going to find in someone's yearbook? Evidence that Kavanaugh was an attempted rapist at age 17? Do you see how far we're getting here from finding evidence of the actual allegations by Ford? If this is anything, it's another attempt by Sheldon Whitehouse to get some more shots at Kavanaugh's character by bringing up things said in high school over 35 years ago. But later, we also got some more questioning about Kavanaugh's drinking, which people still keep claiming that Kavanaugh has been consistently perjuring himself over his drinking. I don't know what the hell they are talking about. He has been saying over and over that he likes beer, drank a lot of it during his high school and college years, and even drank too much at times to the point of puking.
I drank beer with my friends. Sometimes I had too many beers. I liked beer. I still like beer. Had beers, have some beers. One beer, drink beer, drinks beer, drank beer, and drinking beer. You've probably had beers, Senator. You know, I got a weak stomach, whether it's with beer. I like beer.
You haven't answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
Do you like beer, Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one.
Hanging out and having some beers with friends, which I gladly do, and which I fully embrace.
See? He drinks beer! He drinks beer! Yeah, he said he drinks beer. I don't know what people think they're proving here. But in particular with his drinking was the supposed drinking game brought up by Senator Whitehouse.
Devil's Triangle.
Drinking game.
How's it played?
3 glasses in a triangle.
And?
You ever played quarters?
No.
Okay, it's a quarters game.
Immediately, there was an orgy of media speculation all over Twitter about how this Devil's Triangle game is actually code word for some hardcore 3-way sex. Brett Kavanaugh said a Devil's Triangle is a drinking game and people have thoughts. Is it a drinking game or a threesome with 2 men and 1 woman? And how did it come to this? Oh great, it's BuzzFeed. So they start pointing to Google search trends and Urban Dictionary definitions saying that it actually refers to threesomes. Did you hear Eric and Brian were in a Devil's Triangle with Sarah last night? Yeah, man, I did. What homos? No, man, it's cool. They didn't make eye contact. Well, on October 3rd, Kavanaugh's yearbook was published online for everyone to see. And if you flip to page 203, you get this guy, Bernard McCarthy. Devil's Triangle, founder of the name. And in a letter sent by both McCarthy here and 3 other classmates, they insist that Devil's Triangle was nothing more than a drinking game. Well, that didn't stop Senator Ted Lieu from saying otherwise. When Kavanaugh lied about Devil's Triangle, it wasn't just a slip of the tongue. He falsely said it was a drinking game. When pressed, he said it was 3 glasses and a triangle. Then he said it's played like a quarters game. He made up an extended lie under oath. And after being called out on it, Ted Lieu still decided to double down. This is holding up well. Care to apologize, sir? Thanks, it is holding up well. Read this from Kavanaugh's roommate. Sir, your Devil's Triangle allegation has been blown up by schoolmates, including the one who devised the game, and was noted to have done so in the yearbook. The honorable thing to do would be to admit that. But Ted doesn't care. Based on the totality of the evidence, I believe Kavanaugh's roommate. I also believe Dr. Ford. The totality of the evidence. There is no evidence! Good God! It also didn't stop Sheldon Whitehouse here either. I don't believe boof is flatulent. I don't believe a Devil's Triangle is a drinking game, and I don't believe calling yourself a girl's alumnus is being her friend. Nothing's gonna stop him, guys. And also, I guess the word boof, Devil's Triangle, and alumnus now mean attempted rape. What a joke. Later on, we get from Kamala Harris more of the same notion of, why aren't you calling an FBI investigation on yourself?
So I'm gonna ask you one last time. Are you willing to ask the White House to authorize the FBI to investigate the claims that have been made against you?
Well, I'll do whatever the committee wants, of course.
And I've heard you say that, but
The witness
I've not heard you answer a very specific question that's been asked, which is, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct an investigation by the FBI to get to whatever you believe is the bottom of the allegations that have been levied against you?
The FBI would gather witness statements. You have
Sir,
the witness statements.
I don't want to debate with you how they do their business. I'm just asking, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct such an investigation? Because as you are aware, the FBI did conduct a background investigation into you before we were aware of these most recent allegations. So are you willing to ask the White House to do that? And say yes or no, and then we can move on.
We've had 6 background investigations over 26 years.
Sir, as it relates to the recent allegations, are you willing to have them do it?
The witness testimony is before you. No witness who was there supports that I was there.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, and we can move on.
This is Kamala yet again making this into a political charade. She knows damn well that the Senate Judiciary Committee has the power to interview people. She knows what she's doing here. She knows that the people watching this hearing, if any, probably don't know much about the process, and is running on that so she can try and insinuate some semblance of guilt on Kavanaugh for not calling an investigation on himself. Again, what's the implication here? If you don't call an investigation on yourself, you're probably guilty of something.
Did you meet with Senator Dianne Feinstein on August 20th?
I did meet with Senator Feinstein.
Did you know that her staff had already recommended a lawyer to Dr. Ford?
I did not know that.
Did you know that her and her staff had this allegations for over 20 days?
I did not know that at the time.
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me. You've got nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsay said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham. That you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are. God, I hate to say it because these have been my friends. But let me tell you, when it comes to this, you're looking for a fair process. You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend. This is going to destroy the ability of good people to come forward because of this crap. Your high school yearbook. You have interacted with professional women all your life, not one accusation. You're supposed to be Bill Cosby when you're a junior and senior in high school. And all of a sudden you got over it. It's been my understanding that if you drug women and rape them for 2 years in high school, you probably don't stop. To my Republican colleagues, if you vote no, you're legitimizing the most despicable thing I have seen in my time in politics. You want this seat? I hope you never get it. I hope you're on the Supreme Court. That's exactly where you should be. And I hope that the American people will see through this charade.
Kavanaugh's sexual assault hearing turns partisan as Republican senators lash out at treatment of Supreme Court nominee. Oh no, it wasn't partisan before that. It wasn't partisan when Dianne Feinstein held Ford's letter for 6 weeks until the moment it became politically useful. No, now it's partisan. Only when Republicans get involved do things ever get partisan in this country. Okay, so now that we got through Kavanaugh's testimony, we need to talk about some of the worst arguments I have ever heard in my life. And I mean some of the dumbest, disingenuous, and vitriolic comments I have ever heard in my life up to that point in the public sphere. All of which aimed at absolutely ruining Brett Kavanaugh's life, and all of which were spoken by actual people in the media, academia, and politics. People who are theoretically held to high standards in American public life, bringing out some of the biggest piles of horseshit I have ever seen. So let's start with this one. Oh my god, look at Kavanaugh's face. Look at his anger. That's a rapist right there. Guilty. With him screaming and interrupting senators, I could imagine him putting his hand over someone's mouth. Mr. Kavanaugh's temperament and condescending attitude towards the female senators says enough about Mr. Kavanaugh and his guilt, period. Folks, we are all getting a taste of the aggression that emerged when Kavanaugh got drunk, and it ain't pretty. His demeanor is not rebutting the allegations. If anything, it is validating them. Alcoholism stunts your emotional growth, so if you start drinking alcoholically as a teenager, you stay a teenager emotionally until you deal with it. Explains a lot about Brett Kavanaugh, from his combative behavior yesterday to his unusual bond with teenage girls' basketball teams. If Brett Kavanaugh can be this angry on national TV, imagine what he's like when he gets inebriated.
All of a sudden, we see a man transformed. All of a sudden, his anger is triggered. And what we saw today is someone who you could now see attacking a woman. It's very frightening. And I think...
Now this right here is some shit. I mean, this is hot garbage. This argument is literally, wow, he's pretty angry. Yeah, that's a rapist right there. This is the real take for hundreds of thousands of people. This is the take from actual journalists, lawyers, politicians. Look at his rage. That dude could totally do some rape. Whoa! Oh boy, Kavanaugh is going full angry, belittled, marginalized white man. Tough sell for today. It is hard to imagine this person being objective and fair on the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh showed himself today to be a partisan hack in a robe, utterly lacking the temperament to be a justice on the Supreme Court, and his repeated refusal to request an FBI investigation speaks volumes. He spent 12 years on the DC Circuit Court. We have never heard of any instance of Kavanaugh not being objective or being in any way biased in any case he's ever presided over. But no, forget all that. We're not looking at Kavanaugh's record anymore. We're looking at his temperament, right now. When the situation is him being accused of gang rape and he gets pissed off about that, nah, he's way too partisan in favor of himself, and his temperament is terrible.
This is gaslighting at its finest. Democrats are saying, you are a gang rapist? You are an alleged rapist of a 15-year-old girl 36 years ago at an unnamed party, at an unnamed location, at an unnamed date. That's you. And then if you get mad, that just shows you're a partisan hack. If you say that I'm only doing that for partisan purposes, well, that shows that you, sir, are the real partisan. You wonder why people are going nuts? Because you're gaslighting them, which is deliberately designed to make people go nuts. That's what gaslighting is. Gaslighting is where you tell somebody something not true, and then when they respond to the untruth, you blame them for responding to the untruth.
The same thing was repeated by Ezra Klein over at Vox. If Kavanaugh believes he is wrongly accused, which is possible whether or not he is, I understand his fury, but the job he wants requires you to step outside yourself and keep an even keel in an almost inhuman way. He is not showing those qualities. And the response to this by Jonah Goldberg, yeah, a real Supreme Court justice should be able to entertain the possibility he ran a rape gang even when he didn't. Matt Walsh also does a great job of mocking this moronic mindset as well. You're a rapist. No, I'm not. Actually, you're a drunken rapist, exhibitionist pervert. No, that's not true. Actually, you're the ringleader and mastermind of a roving mob of violent serial gang rapists. Please stop this! Oh my god, your temperament is terrible! And you know what the response would have been if Kavanaugh showed a little less emotion? Kavanaugh gives unconvincing and robotic performance at hearing. You know how we know that? Because it already happened. A few days before this hearing, Kavanaugh was on a Fox News interview with Martha McCallum, where he had to explain his own history of sexual activity on national television to try and clear himself. Well, you know what the response to all of this was? Walter Shapiro over at The Guardian. Trump reportedly had been scornful of Kavanaugh's unconvincing and robotic denials in his Monday interview with Fox News. The Boston Globe, Patty Wood says that Kavanaugh appeared too robotic and inauthentic for the vast majority of the interview. CNN, expect to see a different Brett Kavanaugh than the robotic figure we saw on Fox News earlier in the week. Joanne Walsh over at The Nation. Kavanaugh was just awful, a blinking, robotic mess. The Atlantic, the man who had been so robotic in his Fox interview. The Hollywood Reporter, Kavanaugh seemed like a malfunctioning Westworld robot. The New York Times, the judge grew robotic at times under Miss McCallum's scrutiny. Slate Magazine, Kavanaugh's robotic repetition. Paste Magazine, the robotic regurgitation of talking points by Kavanaugh. The Los Angeles Times, sometimes you can be so on message that you come off looking robotic. So we know what the response would have been. And I can't blame Kavanaugh for getting pissed off. Within 10 days, he became known as a privileged, toxic, white male gang rapist who gets belligerently drunk to the point where he rapes everything he sees. And the media and the politicians in that very room have given an unbelievable amount of credence to every single wild claim that popped up during that time. From high school gossip, to fart jokes having some sort of secret rapey meaning, to Kavanaugh possibly assaulting the girls he coaches, to everything.
The day after the allegation appeared, I told this committee that I wanted a hearing as soon as possible to clear my name. I demanded a hearing for the very next day. Unfortunately, it took the committee 10 days to get to this hearing. In those 10 long days, as was predictable and as I predicted, my family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations. The 10-day delay has been harmful to me and my family, to the Supreme Court, and to the country. Since my nomination in July, there's been a frenzy on the left to come up with something, anything, to block my confirmation. Shortly after I was nominated, the Democratic Senate leader said he would, quote, oppose me with everything he's got. A Democratic senator on this committee publicly referred to me as evil. Evil. Think about that word. And said that those who supported me were, quote, complicit in evil. Another Democratic senator on this committee said, quote, Judge Kavanaugh is your worst nightmare. A former head of the Democratic National Committee said, quote, Judge Kavanaugh will threaten the lives of millions of Americans for decades to come.
This guy has had the whole media and political smear campaign run all over him. And people are wondering why he's angry?
I'm never going to get my reputation back. My life is totally and permanently altered.
And I find this particular line about his temperament really rich when it also comes from the same people claiming that this is just your ordinary job interview.
It's a job interview for Judge Kavanaugh.
This is a job interview.
It is a job interview.
This is a job interview. It's really a job interview. In your job interview?
Yeah, you know, I often get publicly accused of gang rape in my job interviews. It happens all the time. Oh, hi, Juice Boy. Please have a seat. Yes. So, I was looking over your resume last night, and then, I got a phone call from this woman at 9 p.m. saying that, you like raping puppies in the butthole. Is this true? What? Stop. And what? And you, what? And you can't just deny the allegation either. You need to convince me that you don't rape puppies in the butthole. What the fuck? I'm just trying to apply for a job at Costco. What is this? Listen, bro, I'm not the one raping puppies in the butthole here, okay? That's you. I never said that! Are you yelling at me? What? Stop yelling at me! Is this some kind of joke? Wow, is this really how you treat the seriousness of puppy rape allegations? You must be a puppy raper. I'm calling the media. We're gonna plaster this story all over the world, bitch. There is a reason why we have due process of law in criminal courts, and there should at least be an ounce of due process in the presumption of innocence in the court of public opinion. This is what our civilization is founded on. We have standards for a reason. If we have no standards in our culture, then no man could know what would be the test of honor in a nation continually varying in the standard of its coin. There are process costs involved in trading standards and expectations for nothing. Anyone can be under serious penalty of law on the basis of what anyone, anywhere says about them, true or false.
You talked in your interview with Martha McCollum the other night about a fair process. Some of my colleagues across the aisle say, well, the burden is not on the accuser because this is a job interview. The burden is on you, but you said you weren't there and it didn't happen. It's impossible for you to prove a negative. So I would just suggest that you have been accused of a crime and that a fair process under the United States Constitution and our notion of fair play means that the people who make an accusation against you have to come forward with some evidence. Isn't that part of a fair process? And part of that means that if you're going to make an allegation, there needs to be corroboration. In other words, you're not guilty because somebody makes an accusation against you in this country. We're not a police state. We don't give the government that kind of power. We insist that those charges be proven by competent evidence. And I know we're not in a court. I've told my colleagues if we were in court, half of them would be in contempt of court. But you have been accused of a crime, and I believe fundamental notions of fair play and justice in our constitutional system require that if somebody's going to make that accusation against you, then they need to come forward with some corroboration, not just allegations.
But these people proclaiming that this is just a job interview and that there's no presumption of innocence and his temperament is terrible, therefore he's unfit, are being so disingenuous and showing their absolute lack of any guiding principles here. They do not care about process, norms, or standards of conduct for discourse in society at large. They don't even care about Kavanaugh's record on the court anymore. No, now it's his temperament here, which has had nothing to do with his behavior on any of the cases he's ever worked on before. No, we're going to hold him on a completely different scenario where he's the one being accused. As Charles Cook writes over at National Review, he's supposed to be neutral, came the cries this afternoon. He's supposed to have a cool temperament. He's supposed to be an umpire. Now, when a judge is acting as a mediator between two competing parties, this is, of course, true. But what about when he's not? What about when, as was the case today, he's not the judge but the accused? In such a case, it is entirely appropriate for a judge to defend himself. Today, Kavanaugh was the accused, and today he simply could not defend himself without making specific criticisms about how he had been treated, about who had said what and when, and yes, about how certain people in the room with him had behaved. To argue he should have refrained from specifics is to say, effectively, he shouldn't have competently defended himself. The next argument flying around was summed up perfectly by one of Ford's friends.
You know, one of the things that's been surprising to me as I've gotten involved in this in the last couple of days is how many women of my class have come forward to me in this last few days and said, I had similar experiences in high school. And this hits me very deeply, and it's very
not with Brett Kavanaugh, but with other boys. Not with Brett
Kavanaugh, but with other boys in our community, and
yes, I've had my own experiences with sexual assault, therefore Kavanaugh is suspect. Or Abigail Disney with a similar sentiment. Brett Kavanaugh reminds me of my father, enraged by threats to power and entitlement. Brett Kavanaugh reminds me of my terrifying dad, therefore he's guilty. Here's what she has to say here. I am inclined to believe the accuser. The world being what it is, the idea that a privileged white boy at an all-boys high school drank too much and got overly aggressive in getting the sex he felt entitled to is a story too often told. We hear these kinds of stories all the time, therefore Kavanaugh is guilty. My own professor in a political science class a few months ago made the exact same comment. She said she experienced sexual assault when she was younger, and then decided to present her own situation and her own anger at the fact that nothing was done about her situation to claim that Kavanaugh's guilty. And then she claimed that she is a rational person. I've been assaulted, therefore Kavanaugh is guilty is about as far away from a rational or logical statement as it gets. But this is the social justice ideology in a nutshell. It has absolutely nothing to do with the truth or innocence or justice of the individuals involved in a case. It has everything to do with the justice of marginalized or historically oppressed classes in society. So it doesn't matter whether or not Kavanaugh may or may not have done anything. The fact that I've been raped, or the fact that I've had experiences with sexual harassment in the past, and so have many other women in society, means that as a class of sexually assaulted women, particularly assaulted by men, to be able to then reprimand that man, just because of circumstances in society that the accused himself may not have even been involved in, is actual justice. It has nothing to do with individuals and everything to do with groups. It's the whole reasoning behind the idea that every single white person alive today is responsible in some form or other for the sins of slavery. It doesn't matter that there is no white person alive today that was even around to own slaves in the 1800s. The mere immutable characteristic of your white-skinnedness means that you are in fact guilty of the sin of slavery and all the ways it has set back African Americans up to the present day, insofar as we claim that those setbacks are a result of the legacy of slavery, because that's its own video topic. And that this must be fixed through social justice. It's an ideology of identity politics, victimhood, and constant vitriol towards others. There will always be an oppressor and an oppressed in the social justice ideology. And there will always be the need to have a sense of cosmic justice for any wrongdoing ever committed by any group throughout the entirety of history. There is no justice for the individual, only justice for the group. However guilty or innocent those individuals within the group might be. All for the purposes of correcting inequities in society. It's a self-destructive and dangerous sense of justice. It makes the entire society both a victim and a perpetrator at the same time. And the people pushing this notion of justice get so sucked into it that they become absolutely devoted to it. Devoted to group justice, not individual justice. Because individual people and the justice received as individual people is an obstacle to social justice. How can you have justice for the victimized group as a whole when you're busy allowing individuals to be vindicated of crimes committed by others within their group? You can't have justice for individuals with this vision of the world. That's not what fairness means in this sense. That's not even what freedom means in this sense. So in the case of Kavanaugh, how can he be innocent when there have been so many men, or white men in particular, who have been guilty of committing crimes of sexual violence? He can't be innocent in this sense, because the group that we are putting him in has been guilty of these things before. And therefore, Ford is being oppressed and isn't truly a free person by the standards of social justice. The experiences of the group of women who have encountered sexual violence bears more weight against any piece of hard evidence that may or may not exonerate Kavanaugh, no matter its relation to his individual case with Christine Blasey Ford. This is why we have the hashtag #BelieveAllWoman crowd, and the unbelievable notion out there that women would never make false accusations or lie about an incident of sexual assault, and that women are somehow just these pure angels who would never do anything wrong because they're oppressed. These are ideas that make people feel good. Ideas whose actual outcomes and implications for society have no bearing over what they represent to people. And in the words of Joseph Schumpeter, the first thing a man will do for his ideals is lie. I don't know how many incidents there have been where it turned out that the woman involved in the sexual assault allegation was lying. Let me just name a few of them for you. The Scottsboro Boys in 1931, which is a case widely studied as an example of a major miscarriage of justice in this country, and where the woman involved falsified their claims of rape. Gregory Counts and Van Dyke Perry were exonerated just last year of a 1991 rape and kidnapping which the accuser admitted she fabricated. The Tawana Brawley case, where she accused 4 white men of having raped her, and the forensics found no evidence of any sexual assault taking place and found the whole thing to be a hoax. The 2013 Columbia University case with Mattress Girl, whose supposed assaulter was found not responsible for any sexual misconduct. The 2014 Rolling Stones article, A Rape on Campus, which described a gang rape incident by a fraternity that was full of erroneous discrepancies in its reporting, and which was also fabricated by the accuser. The Brian Banks case in 2002, where Juanetta Gibson falsely accused him of raping her. These are just a few major examples, and I don't know how many studies there are out there which cite the percentages of false rape reports, or especially this notion out there that eyewitnesses are always 100% reliable, which has never been the case. In a recent National Research Council paper, they write that without awareness, we regularly encode events in a biased manner and subsequently forget, reconstruct, update, and distort the things we believe to be true. And from psychologist Elizabeth Loftus over at the University of Washington, memories are more easily modified, for instance, when the passage of time allows the original memory to fade. False memories are constructed by combining actual memories with the content of suggestions received from others. And with regards to Ford's own statement on indelible in the hippocampus is the trauma, well, that's also kind of hard to hold true. In a paper on the neuroscience of memory from Nature, findings from basic psychological research and neuroscience studies indicate that memory is a reconstructive process that is susceptible to distortion. A commonly held belief among the general public is that an eyewitness's confidence in the accuracy of his or her memory is a strong indicator of the actual accuracy of the memory. But meta-analyses have reported that mistaken eyewitness identification occurred in 75% or more of cases in which a convicted individual was later exonerated on the basis of DNA evidence. Importantly, memory experts generally do not endorse the idea that the confidence and accuracy of a memory are always tightly linked. Although studies in cognitive psychology have shown a positive correlation between memory confidence and accuracy, these studies are typically laboratory-based, use neutral stimuli, and observe general memory phenomena rather than the attributes of memory that are most relevant to court. Research that specifically examines eyewitness testimony or the memory of traumatic events has shown weak or even negative correlations between a person's confidence in the accuracy of a memory and the actual accuracy of that memory. So this notion of #BelieveAllWoman, or that women would never lie about rape, or that eyewitness accounts are always reliable is just not true. Now maybe Ford is remembering what she thinks happened accurately, but we don't know. We have no evidence of anything from this purported night. And I haven't said that Ford is a liar. I happen to believe that something traumatic has happened to her at some point in her life. But we can't just go believing every wild and uncorroborated allegation we see just because we think someone might be telling the truth or not. And all of the science and research on memory makes this article written by James Comey reveal how absolutely clueless the guy is. Yes, the alleged incident occurred 36 years ago. But FBI agents know that time has very little to do with memory. They know every married person remembers the weather on their wedding day, no matter how long ago. Significance drives memory. This is such an anti-scientific statement, it's unbelievable. Time has everything to do with memory. And this statement is so daft. Every married person remembers the weather on their wedding day. Okay, so why doesn't Christine Blasey Ford remember anything about the alleged night? Why can't she remember where the house is? Who owned the house? Who invited her there? How she got there? How she got home? Who else was at the party? The time, the date, or what the weather was even like on that day? Comey is basically undercutting Ford's statement here without even knowing it. This man used to be the FBI director, guys. And going back to the feminist social justice crowd, there's plenty more hypocrisy and lack of principles to sort through. So I've been hearing for a long time now, in the media, entertainment, academia, and from my own university, where I wrote a paper on toxic masculinity, that this patriarchal society we live in teaches men not to show any emotion, that we should be encouraging more men to show their true feelings and express themselves, and not be called names or shamed and discouraged from revealing their true sensitivities. Okay, well here's a take from a New Yorker article. At the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Brett Kavanaugh seemingly weaponized crying, the way a little boy does when he's in trouble. Oh my god. Neon Taster on Twitter made an excellent observation about this when he said that because male tears fly in the face of toxic masculinity narratives, then they must be a secret tool of toxic masculinity. I call this attitude foregone conclusionism. Everything ends up proving your preconceived notions. Or here's a take from Maureen Dowd, entitled White Men Acting Like the New Minority, howling about things that are being taken away from them, aggrieved at anything that diminishes them or saps their power. Yes, you see, Maureen Dowd doesn't seem to care about due process and the presumption of innocence for men, because men. Oh, and also, they're white men. Yeah. And they wonder why the NPC meme is so popular. These people all come walking out of the same institutions and they're all just the same. Nothing unique, just the same bland shit. I never want to hear that women are too emotional ever again after these hearings today. The women are calm and collected, and Kavanaugh is an emotional train wreck.
A few moments later.
I am howling. I am seething with rage. I alternate between sobs and visceral screams. Women who support Trump and Kavanaugh are gender traitors. Men who do so are accomplices to sexual assault and the deaths of women who will die if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And we got some more wise words from everyone's favorite smug leftist, Stephen Colbert.
Perhaps the Kavanaugh quote that sticks with me is his passionate condemnation of the hearing and its repercussions.
You sowed the wind. For decades to come, I fear that the whole country will reap the whirlwind.
You really need a better weatherman. Because, let me tell you, brother, this is the whirlwind. And the wind was sown when Donald Trump had 19 credible allegations of sexual assault against him, bragged about sexual assault on tape, and your Republican buddies up on that committee said, yeah, but we want our guy on the Supreme Court. And that's you, Brett. That doesn't mean you're guilty, but please, save your indignation that finally someone is taking one woman's accusation of sexual assault seriously. We'll be right back.
Wait, this is a comedy show, right? So Brett Kavanaugh has no right to be angry, he has no right to be pissed off at the smearing of his name and reputation because Donald Trump gets to get away with it and the Republicans let him. This does not follow? Wait, this is a comedy show, right? The audience is clapping at this. They're not laughing. Oh, and for all you people out there who are upset that I used this clip from Colbert in the first Kavanaugh video, do not pretend that late-night comedy shows are not in any way politically influential. Stephen Colbert is of the left. He doesn't hide it. Politicians specifically use their programs to push their agendas. They admit it. They don't hide it.
So, Orange Man. Bad.
Trump. Gloom.
Bloom.
Cramp.
Riff.
And you do not get to hide under the mantra of, oh, I'm just a comedian, my words don't actually mean anything. Yeah, I'm not buying that crap. But after all of this, after all the emotion, and after all the character attacks on everyone, surely Cory Booker can provide us with some semblance of level-headedness, right?
And then ultimately, not whether he's innocent or guilty, this is not a trial, but ultimately, have enough questions be raised that we should not move on to another candidate.
Oh, okay, so have enough questions been raised? Also, this has nothing to do with the truth. Okay.
Yeah. I just think it's a big waste of time, that's all. It's just a big waste of time. Yes! Yes, that is what I'm talking about. It's just waste of time. I don't see the point. Yeah, I know. No point. Yes, exactly. Exactly what I'm talking.
Now, after all the drama at the hearing, Senator Jeff Flake decided to call for a 1-week delay to allow for an additional FBI investigation, which, as I keep saying, is literally just the FBI going out and interviewing people. Now, when this investigation was called, it was deemed a limited investigation by the White House, which restricted the FBI to talking to only 4 people involved in the allegations. But then later, the scope expanded to interviewing anyone it deems necessary as long as the review is finished by the end of the week. Now, here's the thing about this FBI investigation. So we know that the Democrats have been urging for an FBI investigation to go forward for weeks now. But you'd be foolish to think that they'd abide by whatever the FBI comes up with, or use it as any sort of evidence vindicating Kavanaugh. You know what happens if the FBI comes up with no evidence against Kavanaugh, which they did after this brief investigation concluded? Well, then they just say that the FBI investigation was a sham, and that it was always a sham, since the very beginning, because it's run by Trump. So the FBI report doesn't matter at all. Kavanaugh is still a guilty piece of shit. Here's Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy summing it up perfectly. Yes, of course there should be an FBI investigation, but whatever they find doesn't change the fact that Kavanaugh, especially after his performance yesterday, is the most dangerous Supreme Court pick of our lifetime. Yeah, so in other words, they don't care about the FBI investigation. Just get Kavanaugh out, and do whatever you have to do to justify getting him out. And this was the same thing that happened with the Clarence Thomas investigation. The FBI came out with no evidence of any sexual wrongdoing by Clarence Thomas, but that didn't stop his own smear campaign. Screw that report! He's still guilty! He's guilty! Now, during the time that this additional FBI investigation was taking place, we also got some more information released in the media about Julie Swetnick, the third accuser. A former boyfriend of hers, Dennis Ketterer, came out with a statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee stating that he used to be a weeknight meteorologist in Washington, D.C., and even won an Emmy in 1995, and that he met Julie Swetnick at a bar and would wind up meeting her at her house a couple of times over the next few weeks. He says they never had sex, even though there was physical contact, and that Julie knew he was having marital issues, but continued seeing him anyways. He says that the impression he got of her was that she was an opportunist, and that she only had interest in my 350-pound self because I was on television and well known. He also says that when they did talk about sex, that she said she had a penchant for group sex, and that she wanted to know if he would be interested in that. He says she never mentioned anything about being sexually assaulted, raped, gang raped, or having sex against her will, and that she never mentioned Brett Kavanaugh in any capacity. Later, when he tried to run for the Congress in Maryland's 8th District, he called her father to try and get in contact with her, when her father apparently told him that she had psychological and other problems at the time. When I asked, he would not go into detail and said that I wouldn't want her to work on my campaign. His response was rather abrupt. He hung up on me. That was the end of my Julie saga. Based on my direct experience with Julie, I do not believe her allegations against Mr. Kavanaugh. We also got word of another issue surrounding Swetnick, where on March 1st, 2001, a Miami-Dade County court docket shows a petition for a court injunction against her. Apparently, another former boyfriend, Richard Vinicky, who told Politico that he had dated Swetnick for 4 years, tried to get a restraining order placed on Swetnick after she was threatening my family, threatening my wife, and threatening to do harm to my baby at the time after he had broken up with her. He also says, I know a lot about her, she's not credible at all. And then, on October 2nd, we learned of yet another allegation against Kavanaugh from a Jane Doe in Oceanside, California, sent on September 19th. In this letter, she writes that after a party, Kavanaugh and a friend offered her a ride home, where she says that at this point, Kavanaugh and his friend raped her in the car. Here's what she had to say about this. Kavanaugh continued to grope me over my clothes, forcing his kisses on me and putting his hand under my sweater. No, I yelled at him. The boy in the back seat reached around, putting his hand over my mouth and holding my arm to keep me in the car. I screamed into his hand. Kavanaugh continued forcing himself on me. He pulled up my sweater and bra, exposing my breasts, and reached into my panties, inserting his fingers into my vagina. My screams were silenced by the boy in the back seat covering my mouth and groping me as well. Kavanaugh slapped me and told me to be quiet and forced me to perform oral sex on him. He climaxed in my mouth. They forced me to go into the back seat and took turns raping me several times each. And you know what's fantastic about this story? None of this ever happened. She made it up. On October 3rd, the woman, whose name is Judy Monroe Layton, came forward in an email to the committee staff saying, "I am Jane Doe from Oceanside, California. Kavanaugh raped me." And according to Senator Grassley, given her relatively unique name, committee investigators were able to use open source research to locate Miss Monroe Layton and determine that she, 1, is a left-wing activist, 2, is decades older than Judge Kavanaugh, and 3, lives in neither the Washington, D.C. area nor California, but in Kentucky. Eventually, on November 1st, 2018, committee investigators connected with Miss Monroe Layton by phone and spoke with her about the sexual assault allegations against Judge Kavanaugh she had made to the committee. Under questioning by committee investigators, Miss Monroe Layton admitted, contrary to her prior claims, that she had not been sexually assaulted by Judge Kavanaugh and was not the author of the original Jane Doe letter. When directly asked by committee investigators if she was, as she had claimed, the Jane Doe from Oceanside, California who had sent the letter to Senator Harris, she admitted, No, I did that as a way to grab attention. I am not Jane Doe, but I did read Jane Doe's letter. I read the transcript of the call to your committee. I saw it online. It was news." I'm not sure she realized that her actual name was in the email she sent, but anyway, she further confessed to committee investigators that 1, she just wanted to get attention, 2, it was a tactic, and 3, that it was just a ploy. Regarding the false sexual assault allegations she made via her email to the committee, she said, "I was angry and I sent it out." When asked by committee investigators whether she had ever met Judge Kavanaugh, she said, "Oh Lord, no." So Senator Grassley appropriately referred her to the Department of Justice and the FBI for making false accusations and obstructing justice. Add that to the false rape accusations. But after all this, the FBI came back and after their 7th background check on Kavanaugh, came up yet again with nothing. And later in the day, Mitch McConnell moved forward and invoked cloture on October 4th. But perhaps the most damning report presented about this whole situation was by the Arizona prosecutor herself, who essentially discredits Ford point by point in her 5-page memo released a couple of days after the testimonies. In the report, she notes 9 significant problems with Ford's testimony and underscores that her case is even weaker than a he said she said case. Let's go through what she had to say. 1. Dr. Ford has not offered a consistent account of when the alleged assault happened. In a July 6 text to the Washington Post, she said it happened in the mid-1980s. In her July 30th letter to Senator Feinstein, she said it happened in the early 1980s. Her August 7th statement to the polygrapher said it happened one high school summer in the early 80s, but she crossed out the word early for reasons she did not explain. A September 16th Washington Post article reported that Dr. Ford said it happened in the summer of 1982. Similarly, the September 16th article reported that notes from an individual therapy session in 2013 show her describing the assault as occurring in her late teens, but she told the Post and the committee that she was 15 when the assault allegedly occurred. She has not turned over her therapy records for the committee to review. 2. Dr. Ford has struggled to identify Judge Kavanaugh as the assailant by name. No name was given in her 2012 marriage therapy notes. No name was given in her 2013 individual therapy notes. Dr. Ford's husband claims to recall that she identified Judge Kavanaugh by name in 2012. At that point, Judge Kavanaugh's name was widely reported in the press as a potential Supreme Court nominee if Governor Romney won the presidential election. In any event, it took Dr. Ford over 30 years to name her assailant. Delayed disclosure of abuse is common, so this is not dispositive. 3. When speaking with her husband, Dr. Ford changed her description of the incident to become less specific. Dr. Ford testified that she told her husband about a sexual assault before they were married, but she told the Washington Post that she informed her husband that she was the victim of physical abuse at the beginning of their marriage. 4. Dr. Ford has no memory of key details of the night in question, details that could help corroborate her account. She does not remember who invited her to the party or how she heard about it. She does not remember how she got to the party. She does not remember in what house the assault allegedly took place, or where that house was located with any specificity. Perhaps most importantly, she does not remember how she got from the party back to her house. Her inability to remember this detail raises significant questions. She told the Washington Post that the party took place near the Columbia Country Club. The club is more than 7 miles from her childhood home as the crow flies, and she testified that it was a roughly 20-minute drive from her childhood home. She also agreed for the first time in her testimony that she was driven somewhere that night, either to the party or from the party or both. Dr. Ford was able to describe hiding in the bathroom, locking the door, and subsequently exiting the house. She also described wanting to make sure that she did not look like she had been attacked, but she has no memory of who drove her or when. nor has anyone come forward to identify him or herself as the driver. Given that this all took place before cell phones, arranging a ride home would not have been easy. Indeed, she stated that she ran out of the house after coming downstairs and did not state that she made a phone call from the house before she did, or that she called anyone else thereafter. She does, however, remember small, distinct details from the party unrelated to the assault. For example, she testified that she had exactly 1 beer at the party and was taking no medication at the time of the alleged assault. 5. Dr. Ford's account of the alleged assault has not been corroborated by anyone else she identified as having attended, including her lifelong friend. Moreover, Dr. Ford testified that her friend Leland, apparently the only other girl at the party, did not follow up with Dr. Ford after the party to ask why she suddenly disappeared. 6. Dr. Ford has not offered a consistent account of the alleged assault. According to her letter to Senator Feinstein, Dr. Ford heard Judge Kavanaugh and Mark Judge talking to other partygoers downstairs while she was hiding in the bathroom after the alleged assault. But according to her testimony, she could not hear them talking to anyone. Her account of who was at the party has been inconsistent. According to the Washington Post account of her therapy notes, there were 4 boys in the bedroom in which she was assaulted. She told the Washington Post that the notes were erroneous because there were 4 boys at the party but only 2 in the bedroom. In her letter to Senator Feinstein, she said me and 4 others were present at the party. In her testimony, she said there were 4 boys in addition to Leland Kaiser and herself. She could not remember the name of the 4th boy and no one has come forward. Dr. Ford listed Patrick P.J. Smith as a bystander in her statement to the polygrapher and in her July 6 text to the Washington Post, although she testified that it was inaccurate to call him a bystander. She did not list Leland Kaiser even though they are good friends. Leland Kaiser's presence should have been more memorable than P.J. Smith's. 7. Dr. Ford has struggled to recall important recent events relating to her allegations, and her testimony regarding recent events raises further questions about her memory. Dr. Ford struggled to remember her interactions with the Washington Post. Dr. Ford could not remember if she showed a full or partial set of therapy notes to the Washington Post reporter. She does not remember if she actually had a copy of the notes when she texted the Washington Post WhatsApp account on July 6th. Dr. Ford refused to provide any of her therapy notes to the committee. Dr. Ford's explanation of why she disclosed her allegations the way she did raises questions. She claimed originally that she wanted her story to remain confidential, but the person operating the tip line at the Washington Post was the first person other than her therapist or husband to whom she disclosed the identity of her alleged attacker. She testified that she had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President. She did not contact the Senate, however, because she claims she did not know how to do that. She does not explain why she knew how to contact her congresswoman, but not her senator. Dr. Ford could not remember if she was being audio or video recorded when she took the polygraph, and she could not remember whether the polygraph occurred the same day as her grandmother's funeral or the day after her grandmother's funeral. It would also have been inappropriate to administer a polygraph to someone who was grieving. 8. Dr. Ford's description of the psychological impact of the event raises questions. She maintains that she suffers from anxiety, claustrophobia, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The date of the hearing was delayed because the committee was informed that her symptoms prevented her from flying, but she agreed during her testimony that she flies fairly frequently for her hobbies and work. She flies to the Mid-Atlantic at least once a year to visit her family. She has flown to Hawaii, French Polynesia, and Costa Rica. She also flew to Washington, D.C. for the hearing. Note too that her attorneys refused a private hearing or interview. Dr. Ford testified that she was not clear whether investigators were willing to travel to California to interview her. It therefore is not clear that her attorneys ever communicated Chairman Grassley's offer to send investigators to meet her in California or wherever she wanted to meet to conduct the interview. She alleges that she struggled academically in college, but she has never made any similar claim about her last 2 years of high school. It is significant that she used the word contributed when she described the psychological impact of the incident to the Washington Post. Use of the word contributed rather than caused suggests that other life events may have contributed to her symptoms, and when questioned on that point, she said she could think of nothing as striking as the alleged assault. 9. The activities of congressional Democrats and Dr. Ford's attorneys likely affected Dr. Ford's account, and Mitchell provides a timeline of Dr. Ford's encounters with Democratic officials and her lawyers, which paints a much more coordinated picture between all of these groups from July to September. But this memo is pretty much the ultimate discrediting document out there of Ford, which also means that the Democratic senators completely ignored its existence or relevance for this entire situation. And 2 days later, the Senate voted to confirm Kavanaugh in a 50-48 vote, bringing him to the Supreme Court where he presides to this day. And one of the deciding votes in all of this, Susan Collins, gave a pretty succinct reason for her support of the guy.
I understand both viewpoints. This debate is complicated further by the fact that the Senate confirmation process is not a trial. But certain fundamental legal principles about due process, the presumption of innocence, and fairness do bear on my thinking, and I cannot abandon them.
And she also went on to reveal how Michael Avenatti's parading of Julie Swetnick's allegation was one of the deciding factors for her support of Kavanaugh.
Some of the allegations levied against Judge Kavanaugh illustrate why the presumption of innocence is so important. I am thinking in particular not of the allegations raised by Professor Ford, but of the allegation that when he was a teenager, Judge Kavanaugh drugged multiple girls and used their weakened state to facilitate gang rape. This outlandish allegation was put forth without any credible supporting evidence and simply parroted public statements of others. That such an allegation can find its way into the Supreme Court confirmation process is a stark reminder about why the presumption of innocence is so ingrained in our American consciousness.
You probably shouldn't have been continuing to parade this guy around, huh? Senate Democrats say Michael Avenatti undercut their case against Brett Kavanaugh. Then why did you guys keep trotting out Avenatti's case as evidence against Kavanaugh? Oh, and he's not going to be running for president anymore, guys. Dang. But Kavanaugh's confirmation didn't go by quietly over in DC, because in comes the mob. Yes, the enraged leftist mobs. All throughout this debacle, we had video after video of radical mobs harassing Republican politicians, causing disturbances, and trying to claw their way into the Supreme Court itself. This also coincided with some more nasty Twitter behavior, like this Minnesota teacher, who was placed on administrative leave and later resigned after tweeting out, "So who's gonna take one for the team and kill Kavanaugh?" This teacher also seems to be a good example of what modern-day feminism can do to a person. Or this writer who works for Stephen Colbert. Whatever happens, I'm just glad we ruined Brett Kavanaugh's life. Yes. But don't worry guys, our very credible and trustworthy media is here to clear things up for us and to tell us that we're wrong in calling these people a mob.
Oh, you're not going to use the mob word here.
They are protesting. They are not an angry mob.
We're subhuman. We're done being polite. Answer your question that you asked of her. Is it mob behavior? No, it's not.
Hold the door, ma'am. You're going to get arrested.
He's created this idea of a mob.
But calling them mobs in the way that the leader McConnell has done is just wrong.
In the Constitution, you can protest whenever and wherever you want.
We believe
Excuse me. It's a go watch. Put up the video.
Mob. Stop.
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you trying to assault me? This is assault.
Yes, Sarah! This kind of like racialized mob language, this kind of Nixonian law and order language that we're hearing. The angry mob, the angry mob, the angry mob, even though these were just peaceful protesters.
Which side was more mob-like? Clearly it was the Republicans.
The president is trying to go too far with some of this rhetoric, you know, his talk of mob rule and so on. I mean, Brooke, have you been to a Trump rally?
Rushing to the top of the steps of the Supreme Court and now besieging the front door of the Supreme Court.
My lying eyes are at it again. The media told me so. By the end of the hearing, all the way up to the confirmation vote, we had at least 403 arrests of protesters. And even my campus had their own Kavanaugh protest. Rally against Kavanaugh! And they all just kind of looked tired and bored. Oh, and we also had a bunch of witches place a hex on Kavanaugh. No, really. And all of this resulted in claims from politicians and people in the media to dismantle the Senate, the Electoral College, and to start packing the court with liberal judges. This is coming from the same people who have been saying for the last 2 years now that Trump is a fundamental threat to our institutional norms and our constitutional republic as we know it. And also, we must get rid of the Senate and Electoral College. As the Senate votes on Kavanaugh's confirmation, let's remember the same amount of people live in Los Angeles as these 7 rural, mostly white states. They have 14 senators while LA shares 2 with the rest of California. We don't live in a democracy where everyone has an equal say. See, Waleed here doesn't seem to have been taught anything in his 8th grade civics course. He doesn't seem to understand that the entire purpose for the existence of the Senate is to give each state equal representation, while the House gives representation by state population. He doesn't seem to understand that we are a constitutional republic by design, and neither does anyone else who pushed this crap about changing the way the Senate operates after Kavanaugh was confirmed. There should now be no squeamishness about the urgency of enlarging the Supreme Court if Democrats have the power to do so after the 2020 elections. The current majority on the court was created through illegitimate means. Changing that majority would not constitute politicizing the court because conservatives have already done this without apology. So, going through the entire judicial nomination process to select a nominee is now illegitimate, but packing the courts? Alright, dude! So this is the line now. If Democrats lose an election, it's because the Electoral College is outdated and must be eliminated, or Russians. And if they lose a Supreme Court seat, it's not because they were pushing baseless allegations and running a smear campaign on Kavanaugh, it's because the Senate should be completely reoriented to fit whatever we want it to be. And let's start packing the court. Or no wait, let's abolish the Supreme Court. Yeah. Now for one final bit of absolute media malfeasance, we have this piece by NBC News. New questions raised about Avenatti claims regarding Kavanaugh. Well, what's all this about? NBC News found other apparent inconsistencies in a second sworn statement from another woman whose statement Avenatti provided to the Senate Judiciary Committee in a bid to bolster Swetnick's claims. In the second statement, the unidentified woman said she witnessed Kavanaugh spike the punch at high school parties in order to sexually take advantage of girls. But less than 48 hours before Avenatti released her sworn statement on Twitter, the same woman told NBC News a different story. Referring to Kavanaugh spiking the punch, "I didn't ever think it was Brett," the woman said to reporters in a phone interview arranged by Avenatti on September 30th after repeated requests to speak with other witnesses who might corroborate Swetnick's claims. As soon as the call began, the woman said she never met Swetnick in high school and never saw her at parties, and had only become friends with her after they were both in their 30s. When asked in the phone interview if she ever witnessed Kavanaugh act inappropriately towards girls, the woman replied, no. She did describe a culture of heavy drinking in high school that she took part in, and said Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge were part of that group. According to the second woman's declaration that Avenatti provided to the Senate Judiciary Committee, she said, "During the years 1981 to 1982, I witnessed firsthand Brett Kavanaugh, together with others, spike the punch at house parties I attended with Quaaludes and/or grain alcohol. I understood that this was being done for the purpose of making girls more likely to engage in sexual acts and less likely to say no." The statement also said that Kavanaugh was overly aggressive and verbally abusive to girls. This conduct included inappropriate physical contact with girls of a sexual nature. But reached by phone independently from Avenatti on October 3rd, the woman said she only skimmed the declaration. After reviewing the statement, she wrote in a text on October 4th to NBC News, "It is incorrect that I saw Brett spike the punch. I didn't see anyone spike the punch. I was very clear with Michael Avenatti from day one." Shortly after tweeting out the woman's allegations on October 2nd, Avenatti confirmed to NBC News that it was the same woman interviewed by phone on September 30th. But when questioned on October 3rd about the discrepancies between what she said in the phone interview and the serious allegations in the sworn declaration, Avenatti said he was disgusted with NBC News, and at one point, in an apparent effort to thwart the reporting process, he added in the phone call, "How about this? On background, it's not the same woman. What are you going to do with that?" After NBC News received text messages from the woman refuting some of the claims in the declaration, NBC reached out again to Avenatti, who defended the declaration. "I have no idea what you were talking about," he said in the text. "I have a signed declaration that states otherwise, together with multiple audio recordings where she stated exactly what is in the declaration. There were also multiple witnesses to our discussions." He sent a follow-up message moments later. "I just confirmed with her yet again that everything in the declaration is true and accurate," Avenatti said. "She must have been confused by your question." Roughly 5 minutes later, the woman sent a formally worded text backing Avenatti. "Please understand that everything in the declaration is true, and you should not contact me anymore regarding this issue." But when reached by phone minutes later, the woman again insisted that she never saw Kavanaugh spike the punch or act inappropriately toward women. She said she's been consistent in what she told Michael. In a subsequent text on October 5th, she wrote, "I will definitely talk to you again and no longer Avenatti. I do not like that he twisted my words." Well shit guys, this sounds like pretty big news busting Avenatti's entire claim. And according to these dates, NBC knew about all this before Kavanaugh was even confirmed by the Senate. But what's this? The article was published on October 25th, a whole 19 days after Kavanaugh was confirmed. Wait a second. You mean to tell me that NBC News had knowledge of serious discrepancies in Avenatti's entire case here before Kavanaugh was even confirmed, when he still had charges of gang rape hanging over him, and it wasn't even clear that he would be confirmed by the Senate? And they didn't publish this until 19 days after he was confirmed? So NBC knew this entire claim was false, but chose not to tell us until this entire situation no longer became relevant. When we say the mainstream media is a biased and rotten shithole, this is why. This man was being judged by the whole country on the basis of these allegations by Swetnick, and NBC News just stood by and did nothing when they knew false claims were being made, and they knew that Michael Avenatti had been twisting the words of a key witness to his claims. Unbelievable. They didn't want to take the risk of derailing the Democrats' last best chance to stop Kavanaugh at a decisive moment. Isn't it as simple as that? And if it is, an ominous question must be asked. If the Democrats had managed to flip Collins and Flake, would this NBC report have ever been published? Imagine the outrage on the right if Trump's nominee had been defeated with help from Avenatti, only to discover that a huge media organization had evidence of chicanery all along. And we still don't know why NBC sat on this story for as long as it did. We'll probably never know. Oh well. But Chuck Grassley wasn't having any of this. Indeed, the evidence appears to support the position that Julie Swetnick and Mr. Avenatti criminally conspired to make materially false statements to the committee and obstruct the committee's investigation. And on October 25th, Senator Grassley referred both Avenatti and Swetnick to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation. Professional douchebag. I will ask the same question again to the people on the left currently watching this video. Do you guys still trust the media? And now we can move on to the results of the midterm election. Now going into it, the whole Kavanaugh debacle became an extremely motivating factor for Republicans with regards to the Senate. They were expected to keep a pretty strong hold on the Senate and gain an estimated 4 seats, despite the historical trend of midterms going pretty bad for the party in power. And this was primarily the case for Democratic Senators Claire McCaskill in Missouri, Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, Joe Donnelly in Indiana, Bill Nelson in Florida, and Joe Manchin in West Virginia, who were all in very competitive re-election races and either expressed interest in voting against Kavanaugh or were ambiguous as to what they were going to do. And in the end, all but one, Joe Manchin, voted against Kavanaugh. And what do you know? Every Democratic senator in a competitive midterm race who voted against Brett Kavanaugh lost. Joe Manchin seemed to have made the smartest political move out of all of them. So the lesson for the Senate with regards to the Democrats seems to be, don't launch an outrageous character assassination against an innocent man, pervert justice and decency, and wave it around on national television as a means of blocking a Supreme Court justice. The House, however, seemed like it would wind up losing out to the Democrats. The polling wasn't very strong for Republicans leading up to the election, and the Democrats were out in a fury after the loss in 2016 and their absolute repulsion with Trump. Now, contrary to the insistent claims of a blue wave all across the Congress, which didn't really apply to the Senate, the blue wave wound up being a slow blue wave. There were some very close races all across the country, many of which required multiple recounts, most notably in Florida, which pushed the blowback for Republicans throughout the next week that they would have otherwise experienced on Election Day itself. But in the end, the Republicans lost 2 purple states in Nevada and Arizona, Democrats picked up 40 seats in the House, which was the largest gain since 1974, and they gained 7 governorships. By all means, this was a blue wave. Anyone who says otherwise has no idea what they are talking about. The Democrats kicked ass in the House, but it just took a while to realize those gains due to the long recount times, which resulted in a rather mediocre response from Democrats. They were expecting a blue tsunami to completely dominate the Congress, but despite the major gain in the House, they were pretty disappointed. Meanwhile, on the other end, the Republicans seemed pretty indifferent about losing the House for some reason, which goes more towards the lack of any real legislative agenda for Republicans over their Senate agenda to place more judges on federal courts. They got their tax rate cuts, now they can go back to doing nothing. The lesson for Republicans is much more significant and much more obvious. Republicans were spared an even rougher election night by the fact that many of their losses took another week to become official, and by the aforementioned Senate wins. And those losses were entirely due to the alienation of one critical demographic: suburban Republicans and independents who are repulsed by the style of Donald J. Trump. When Orange County, California, the heart of Reagan conservatism, decides to vote for a Democratic governor and now has 0 Republicans representing them in the House, you know you did something wrong. And the main problem here is Trump. No one likes the guy. Suburban Republicans don't like him, independents don't like him, and he drives out Democratic opposition against him. Listen guys, the memes might be funny, but the memes are not enough to keep him up. At the end of the day, people still do not like him, young and old, and the age demographics aren't looking good for Republicans either. And the election results especially didn't go well thanks to the change in the news cycle moving from Kavanaugh to Trump making an ass of himself and pushing forward the crisis of the migrant caravan. That will drive out opposition from the people you need to vote for you. That will put the focus from the guy that people thought was being viciously maligned to the guy that no one likes. So the man does himself no favors by being in the media spotlight. And this also goes more towards the fact that he didn't have a Hillary Clinton to run against this year. The referendum is now against him, and he's not liked by anyone. And most importantly, people in the suburbs. And it also doesn't help when you seem to have a deranged fan sending bombs to your political opponents. Not a good news cycle for Trump leading up to this. So if the Republicans don't want to see their foothold in suburbia disappear, they better get to work. Their 2020 prospects aren't looking good in these areas, and the northern states that he picked up by a slim margin in 2016 could easily go right back to blue. This is going to be the area to watch out for in 2020, supposing Trump is able to retain Florida. Meanwhile, we'll have to see if Democrats decide to continue pushing out more radical intersectional candidates over their more moderate candidates, who perform particularly well in this midterm election. But that's it for the 2018 midterms. The 2020 elections start right now. Oh, but what's this? Kavanaugh's impact on the Supreme Court and the country might not be as profound as predicted. Oh, just fuck my ass. But to sum up on the whole Kavanaugh situation, there have been way too many people in the media, politics, you name it, who have treated uncorroborated, unverified, and evidence-free allegations as absolute facts and absolute truth. There has been way too many people who have thrown out absolutely disingenuous and dishonest arguments in an attempt to completely ruin a guy's entire life and reputation. And last I heard about Ford, she's still been getting death threats and being harassed. In an article from NPR in November, she has had to move 4 times, she has had to pay for a private security detail, and she hasn't been able to return to her job as a professor at Palo Alto University. For the love of God, just leave these people alone. Just leave people alone. How hard can that be? But this entire situation reveals what I think is hiding at the core of America today. And that's a deep, pulsating hatred for one another that is just waiting to burst. And then the hate subsides for a while and we all pretend to go back to normal until the next disaster, where we strip away the facade and we rip on each other again. And all of this goes back to the lack of a basic sense of unity with each other. A lack of a common set of shared values, principles, and a vision for this country. Worse than that, we lack any real meaning or sense of why this country is even important or why we should even care. And you know what? I think this is only going to get worse. There was a recent survey published by the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness which showed that nearly half of millennials believe that America is not the greatest country in the world. 38% of millennials do not believe that America has a history that we should be proud of. 19% of millennials think that the American flag is a sign of intolerance and hatred. 14% think that America was never a great country and it never will be. 84% of Americans do not know the specific rights enumerated in the First Amendment. Almost half of all young Americans think this country is more racist than any other nation, and half of them also think that this country is full-on sexist. The institution that conducted the survey said they were totally unprepared for what our national survey reveals, an epidemic of anti-Americanism. A major fraction of an entire generation has been indoctrinated by teachers starting in grade school that America is what's wrong with the world. Younger Americans are becoming unmoored from the institutions, knowledge, and American spirit that keeps America great. A recent Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation survey found that 51% of millennials would rather live in a communist or socialist country. Only 28% of college graduates could name James Madison as the father of the Constitution. 39% don't even know that Congress has the war power. A January 2019 Gallup poll showed that 30% of Americans from ages 15 to 29 want to permanently leave the United States. In a paper in the Journal of Democracy, they found that only 32% of millennials believe that it is absolutely essential in a democracy that civil rights protect people's liberty. What we find is deeply concerning. Citizens in a number of supposedly consolidated democracies in North America and Western Europe have not only grown more critical of their political leaders, rather they have also become more cynical about the value of democracy as a political system, less hopeful that anything they do might influence public policy, and more willing to express support for authoritarian alternatives. And according to Pew Research, 40% of millennials think it is okay to limit speech that is offensive to minorities. In other words, millennials are less likely to support free speech. There is such a thing as good and evil. There is such a thing as being a virtuous individual. There are certain values, morals, and standards that our founding document was predicated on, and it demands of people who understand those values, who live their lives responsibly in accordance with those values, and who have a basic understanding of American civics. But the social and cultural trends of our time do not reflect this. We've lost the art of virtue. And no, I am not talking about virtue signaling. I'm talking about personal responsibility. I'm talking about self-improvement, meaning in life, purpose, doing productive things. We've forgotten the pursuit of happiness, which is what all this encompasses. Contrary to contemporary notions of this phrase meaning the pursuit of self-indulgences leading to the resultant state of emotional happiness. No, that is not what this phrase has ever meant. It has always meant the individual pursuit of virtue, striving to be a better person, living a good, moral, and meaningful life. And I feel like the majority of people in this country have lost that, because we don't want to take on that challenge anymore. And it's not easy, it's difficult. Hell, Ben Franklin wrote an entire essay on how difficult pursuing something like this was for him. But that's the whole point. The pursuit of happiness isn't supposed to be easy, it's a challenge. It's a lifelong challenge of self-improvement and responsibility. And we've become way too content with living our lives by the mantra of, do whatever you want that makes you happy and brings you pleasure in your life. Or, heh, whatever dude. That we can't stand to actually change our lives and take some responsibility. Especially when young people these days are told nothing but how perfect they are, and that you don't need to change a thing about yourself. Just keep indulging in yourself, no matter the depravity, because that's what's really good in this world. You do you.
Why be virtuous? That's the question. It's so that you can bear the suffering of life without becoming corrupt.
And it really doesn't help when no one talks about virtue like this. I mean, in all of my education, I have never once heard anyone explain the pursuit of a more virtuous life. I have never once heard from even my own parents that life is a challenge of improving yourself and taking on more responsibility. That conversation never happened. Why do you think Jordan Peterson is so popular among young people? Do you think the people listening to him have ever heard any semblance of the advice he gives them in their own personal lives? If anything, most of the direct parenting I've received on this issue has been an active avoidance of having me endure any kind of struggle. And I think I know why. My parents, and millions of other parents out there, are more interested in the immediate levels of happiness and satisfaction in their children than they are in inculcating any sort of value or deep meaning in life, if they're even consciously aware of those values. And I'm not so sure that they are. I'm not so sure that the majority of parenting in this country is an active effort of instilling good values, or real hard responsibility, or basic decency. It's going to take years to fully fix whatever we've started. And I don't care how many times someone says that Gen Z is gonna be the most conservative generation, dude! I do not see this as a type of conservatism rooted in libertarian or founding principles and philosophy. If this is even a remotely conservative generation, it's a relative conservatism to the obnoxious times we're living in, not a philosophical conservatism. And the rest of society is still worse off. And from all the information I've seen, Gen Z is going to be just as left-leaning or more so than the millennial generation. TikTok is not going to be your grand savior of conservatism, and I'm not smelling whatever cultural shift you're smelling, Dave. And I don't mean to be so pessimistic. I don't want to be pessimistic. But what is it exactly that's out there that says that American society is really ready to take a real introspective look at the problems we have here? That we're really ready to cut the tribal identity politics crap out of our lives and be decent people who can get along with each other? Where's that indicator that says that things in the culture are getting better? We are creating generations upon generations of young people that absolutely despise this country and do not care about standards. And if they're not being raised to despise this country, then they're being raised to be indifferent towards it. What's the big idea? Who cares? Who are these guys? What did they ever do anyways? Indifference towards this country and its existence is on its own enough to further the decay. I was in a class recently where we had to read Ben Franklin's The Way to Wealth, which is essentially his message of just being more responsible and having a strong work ethic to lead a more excellent life. And instead of the class reading that and thinking to themselves, yeah, maybe I can be more productive in my life. Maybe I could have a better work ethic and waste less of my time on Instagram taking pictures of my face and ass. No, instead of that, they were all repulsed.
Oh my god, I mean, he's kind of asking a lot out of me. Yeah, like, I didn't really like what he had to say because he wants me to take, like, a lot of responsibility and stuff, and, like, I just don't really have the time for that.
Oh, fuck me!
Wake the fuck up!
And this isn't some kind of partisan issue. I see this type of behavior and mode of thinking on all sides. It's in the culture. It's the mainstream of American culture. People keep asking me what political party I subscribe to, or that I should have called this channel Republican Juice. Heh. I am not registered with any political party, nor have I ever been, and I definitely don't see myself signing on with any party for the rest of my life. And the more I see things through the lens of constrained and unconstrained ideologies, the less I want anything to do with one party or the other, or the tribal fan service nature of politics today. Oh, but I'm definitely guilty of that tribal attitude. I think when I first started this channel, you could very well consider my first 5 videos to be full-on tribal fan service, except for the spam gangs, because that's something else entirely. Oh, and I don't actually believe in Pizzagate, guys. That entire video was a sardonic explanation of a stupid conspiracy theory. I have since made those videos private. I don't want the general public stumbling on those videos and their recommendations and thinking that the way that information was presented in those videos is a good means for discourse. So you're not going to find them on this platform anymore. I'm done with those videos, and I can't really do that kind of crap anymore. Not only because that style of video making is completely unproductive looking back, but I really don't care about belonging to one tribe or the other anymore, as much as I care about real persuasion and ideas, and how these things are justified by people and impact the national discourse and how we think about things. And I've been having a real hard time tolerating this kind of rhetoric from my own side too lately. But here's my politics. I am against the modern liberal orthodoxy, and all the forms that dogma has taken shape. And no, that does not mean I subscribe to the own the libs philosophy, though it can be funny. And no, it does not mean that Democrats are evil human beings that just want to put everyone in a fucking gulag, or that I hate Democrats. I mean, I am against the very assumptions about the world and the nature of human beings as seen through the vision of the overall left. But this does not mean that I don't have serious qualms with the right, especially with the more unconstrained attitudes of the right, which I see becoming more and more of a pervasive force in the mainstream of right-wing rhetoric, especially with the rise of Trump and Republican populism. And what saddens and disturbs me the most is this growing white identity politics on the right, mixing in with this populist nonsense. Enough of the identity politics. Enough of the tribal crap. You could call me a modern-day conservative. You could call me a classical liberal. I am much closer to those in terms of ideology, but I am not going to go by any labels. I think going by a label hurts more than it helps, and I will not take part in that. But Jonah Goldberg seems to sum up my thoughts on all of this pretty well when he writes that at a time when I've lost my taste for tribal partisan fan service, the market for tribal partisan fan service is raging across the ideological spectrum. I would advise you all to really think carefully about the type of political rhetoric you are surrounding yourself with, and if it's actually conducive to any sort of productive ends. Beware of the grifters and the people who don't go beyond tribal platitudes. Either way, both parties are extremely disappointing to me right now. And the disingenuous, dishonest, and bad faith conversations and arguments that arise from the tribes is not something I care about at all anymore. It's a waste of time and I mentally check out. Which makes it difficult for me to have genuine conversations with people about politics now. Because most people would rather stick to their tribe and make arguments that are simply not honest or really thought out. And I can't be a part of that anymore. And I'm trying my best to stray away from that kind of talk and examine my own problems. But I have to at least try to get out of this psychic trap so I can make better arguments and be more productive in what I'm doing here. Especially now that the channel has grown to such a level that I never thought possible. This channel was not meant to get as big as it is. It was not created to fill the role that it seems to have filled for thousands of people. And that's caused me to seriously look over my own convictions and work on improving the way I make my content. When I made my community post celebrating 100,000 subscribers, I specifically said that the experience was surreal and disturbing. It still is, and it's been disturbing ever since I realized that the channel was going to continue its exponential growth since last year, and specifically because of all the implications of that, and the implications of the way that I had presented certain things in prior videos, and how they'll be obfuscated with the way this channel will naturally progress. This comment summed up pretty well the conflict I was having with myself leading up to the 100K milestone. And still am having. It's constant. Life behind the video you're watching is not very pleasant. It's a constant wait. So, I guess Kanye was right. So to the people wondering in my college video why I am so pessimistic about the future of this country, do you understand now? These trends are not good. What I see around me in everyday public discourse is not good. The lack of meaning among the lives of young people and growing atomization is not good. The slow decay of civil society and mediating institutions is not good, and the filling of all our problems in life with politics, power, and hedonism is definitely not good. And moments of collapse in civil discourse like what we saw with the entire Kavanaugh situation gives us a great look at how bleak society can get, and how it can end up being every day in the near future. And that's what I really see creeping behind the facade of civility right now. A social fabric hanging on by a thread, being slowly chipped away. And it can all just end if people want it to. It can all go away if people just stop thinking that it's worthwhile, if they stop caring, or are not made the case to care. And James Madison seems to agree. To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is a chimerical idea. And I can't tell you how to stop this. I can't tell you what the solution is to change all of this. I don't have a solution. How do you convince tens of millions of individual Americans who have been instilled with the belief that they are fine just the way they are, and that they should change the world to make it whatever they want through government fiat, that maybe they shouldn't do that, and maybe try some introspection or self-improvement, or look to their local communities, and stop enforcing every single one of their wildest beliefs on everyone in society when they can't even take care of themselves? I don't know. I can't tell you. I think we broke that barrier in the 20th century and there's no going back now. We made that trade-off. Society will continue to go its own way, and you can only hope that someone out there is listening. Now, some people have suggested that we make a return to a strong federalist system with a virtuous and religious society, with tough and vibrant mediating institutions, and that can help us find meaning, faith, and a semblance of social stability again. And while I think that's a really great idea, and I will keep promoting those values, I'm not sure that can happen. I think the majority of people in American society have moved beyond that point. And frankly, I don't know that it can handle such a return to religion or feel comfortable operating in a strictly federalist system, or function inside an institution without performing. Again, we already made that trade-off in the 20th century. You can only give the people what they can bear. And I don't think we can bear a return to a Judeo-Christian religious society that stays within the boundaries of its own state and political structures. I do enjoy conversations talking about these things though, and again, I will keep promoting these values. I just think that it's incompatible with the times, barring some serious miracle or disaster where society ends up returning to these things. And even if the fantasy solution of some of splitting into two countries happens, I do not believe that will fix some of the deeper problems we have in our culture. There is some serious patching that needs to take place, that I really don't think the vast majority of people are interested in or even aware of. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there can be some kind of revival in this country. Maybe we can go back to a working federalist system. Maybe we can have strong mediating institutions again that help provide people with meaning. Maybe we can be grateful for the American experiment again and cherish what this country has given us. Maybe we can rebuild a sense of common decency and respect in our culture. Maybe we can find those values and good ethics that made us into a strong country. Maybe we can choose to stop our decline. Maybe. Who knows? Let's see what happens. It might take a couple hundred years. It might take 1,000 years. But maybe it can happen. Put that on my gravestone. But that's my 2 cents on the future of American society. There are deep underlying problems with America right now, and we either work on fixing them or we continue on down our current path of contempt, moral bankruptcy, and witness the decay of the greatest country in the world. This has been Political Juice. Thanks for watching.